Assalamu alaikum everybody and good afternoon. I'm your host for this session, Saddam Hussain, research economist at PIDE. All of you please settle down so we can just start formally. I, on behalf of Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, RASTA, which is Research for Social Transformation and Advancement, and Board of Investment, welcome you all to today's workshop, which is about a regulatory framework of Pakistan. Primarily, it's focused on these two books, which is unprecedented in Pakistan. We have come up with the Sludge audits, reviewing the regulatory frameworks and processes of different activities going on in the country, and pinpointing exactly where should we have slash it down to reduce the sludge, keeping only those which are appropriate and removing those which are excessive and hindering the economic activities. So these are the sludge audits, and today's workshop is basically focused on these. We will first start with the recitation of the Holy Quran. I would like Mansoor Saab to come on stage and please start with the recitation of the Holy Quran. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد صدق الله.
Jazakallah. Thank you, Mansoor Saab. I would now like to request Dr. Nadimul Haq, Vice Chancellor PIDE, to come on stage for the opening remarks. You may have heard him often talking about the excessive regulation and the permission economy, the NOCs economy, the attestation economy. These are the terms coined by Dr. Nadeem. So we would like him to open the session today. Please, sir.
Assalamu alaikum ji. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for turning up. As you can see, our economy has come to a grinding halt. And as you can see, we are talking every day of default. And as you can see, our investment rate is almost non-existent now. I think it's time for a serious crisis evaluation. We are in the middle of a crisis, but unfortunately, there is very little thought on what it means to be in the middle of a crisis. Our investment rate, the investment GDP ratio has never gone up. Only 1 year did it go up above 15%. If the investment rate doesn't go above 15%, we might as well call it quits and invite the Brits back, or invite somebody else. Because a nation that does not invest in itself is not a nation. So what we at the PIDE have been doing is trying to understand why the hell don't we invest? And the big answer that comes glaring at us is the government. And it's time for all government functionaries, many of them are sitting here, to come and tell us why they don't want investment in this country. That's what this conference is all about. We invited a lot of regulatory agencies. I hope they will come, because our analysis shows that this country is being regulated to the point of being stifled. We are being throttled by the NOC permission culture. And time to talk about it openly. I know some regulators actually said that we don't want to come here because we'll be asked tough questions. Guys, we need tough questions. Do you want to kill the country, or do you want this country to grow? So let's look at our investment regime. The whole world has deregulated over and over and over again. The best example is India, as you can say. They paid off the IMF debt. We are in our 23rd program, looking to the 24th, 25th, 26th program. We are never going to get out of the IMF unless we deregulate the economy. So today is a time to have an open conversation. Can we have an open conversation? I know we are a culture where we keep saying, aap aa jaye, pehle aap, pehle aap, pehle aap. That is before we stab somebody in the back. But now it's time to come out in the open and tell us, what is this regulatory regime doing? Do we want investment in this country or not? What is the government doing? We also calculated the footprint of the government. That means the market that the government controls is over 70% of the economy. So where do you want me to invest? Where do you want Bill Gates to come and invest? Where do you want people to invest in this country? The chambers are here, they are equally at fault. Because they're looking for an SRO culture, they're not looking for a competitive culture. So this conference is all about deregulation, deregulation, deregulation. Either convince us we don't need it, or let us convince you that we need it. So I hope that there will be active participation. I hope that you guys will wake up for your future, especially the young people, because I can tell you, I'm leaving. But you guys are in deep trouble if you don't deregulate the economy. If you don't lobby the government officials, say deregulate the economy, we're in deep trouble. So that's what I have to say. And I hope we'll have a vigorous debate. Let's take the gloves off and have an open debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nadeem. That was a powerful teaser that has pretty much set the tone for the session. Now there are two presentations by PIDE senior research economists, Ahmed Waqar Qasim Saab and Dr. Fahim Jahangir Saab. Dr. Ahmed Waqar Qasim has worked extensively on sludge. He will be presenting and discussing the theory of regulation, how much regulation is too much regulation, and does regulation in Pakistan smoothen the functioning of the markets or suffocate them? And finally, Dr. Waqar may have some proposition as a way out. Please, Dr. Waqar. Thank you.
Thank you, Saddam, for the introduction. Well, जी, मेरा नाम अहमद वकार कासिम है. मैं PIDE में काम कर रहा हूँ, trying to understand the regulatory framework of Pakistan and how it is helping or hampering the development of our markets. So I will talk about what I have learned up till now. So जैसा कि आप सबको पता है कि हमारे गुरु जो थे एडम स्मिथ एके अब्दुल कदीर, उनका कहना था कि मार्केट्स देमसेल्व्स आर एफिशिएंट. तो अगर एक इंडिविजुअल जो है वो अपने सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट पे काम करेगा, तो बाय द ग्रेस ऑफ इनविजिबल हैंड जो भी एलोकेशन होगी रिसोर्सेज में वो मैक्सिमाइज होंगी, आपकी वेलबींग मैक्सिमाइज्ड होगी. देन कम्स द क्वेश्चन कि फिर हमें मार्केट रेगुलेट क्यों करना पड़ती है. जो क्रिटिक्स हैं रेगुलेशंस के, वो कहते हैं कि रेगुलेशंस actually interfere the market efficiency, while the advocates suggest that no, regulations actually enhance the efficiency as well as it ensures the equitable outcomes of the market. And the famous economist Joseph Stiglitz made a very good point. He said that we need regulations in three cases. The first one is market failure. The second is irrationality in making choices, and the third one is for the sake of distributive justice. So I will focus only on market failure. अच्छा, जो एडम स्मिथ ने जब बात की कि मार्केट्स जो हैं वो एफिशिएंट होती हैं, तो एरो एंड डब्ल्यू ने उसको कंडीशंस कुछ एलेबोरेट की कि जब वो एफिशिएंसी आप अचीव कर सकते हैं, उसके लिए तीन मेन कंडीशंस थी. परफेक्ट कंपटीशन होना चाहिए आपके पास, कोई एक्सटर्नैलिटी ना हो, और जो पब्लिक गुड्स है वो अवेलेबल ना हो, तो मार्केट जो फंक्शन करेगी वो एफिशिएंट होगी. प्लस इसी काम को थोड़ा सा ग्रीनवुड और स्टिगलिन ने इनहेंस किया. उन्होंने बताया कि हमें जब आपकी इंफॉर्मेशन परफेक्ट ना होगी मार्केट में, तो वो भी मार्केट एफिशिएंटली या पेरिटो ऑप्टिमल नहीं होगी. सो इन केसेस में अगर ये चारों कंडीशंस कोई मार्केट अचीव नहीं कर रही है, देन यू नीड रेगुलेशंस. अगर ये चारों कंडीशंस नहीं हो रही, उसको हम कहते हैं कि मार्केट फेलियर है. तो मार्केट फेलियर को एड्रेस करने के लिए आपको रेगुलेशंस जो हैं वो चाहिए होती हैं. सो मार्केट फेलियर्स को रेगुलेशंस कैसे ओवरकम करती हैं कि ये ओवरकम करती हैं एक्सटर्नैलिटी. एक्सटर्नैलिटी यही है कि मेरे किसी काम एक्ट की वजह से आप पे कुछ असर, आपकी जो भी कह लें कि वेलफेयर है, वो वेलबींग है, वो असरअंदाज हुई है, पॉजिटिव या नेगेटिव, लेकिन मैं आपको उसका कंपनसेट नहीं कर रहा हूँ. इसको एक्सटर्नैलिटी कहते हैं. तो एक्सटर्नैलिटी को टैकल करने के लिए भी रेगुलेशंस जो हैं वो इफेक्टिव टूल है. इसी तरह कंपटीशन किसी मार्केट में एंटी कंपेटिटिव जो भी प्रैक्टिसेस हैं उनको टैकल करने के लिए हमें रेगुलेशंस चाहिए. प्लस इफ वी हैव सम प्रॉब्लम ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन, जैसे डिस्क्लोजर की रिलेटेड रेगुलेशंस हैं कि आपने کنزیومرس کو جو ہے وہ ساری کی ساری انفارمیشنس دینی ہے. اگر آپ کی پرائس انفارمیشنس کا مسئلہ ہے اس کو ٹیکل کرنے کے لیے ریگولیشن ضروری ہیں, اور ان ایکٹیویٹیز میں جہاں پہ رسک ایکسپوجر بہت زیادہ ہے تو وہ ریگولیٹڈ مارکیٹس جو ہے نا وہ ایفیشینٹ ہوتی ہیں زیادہ. اب براڈلی اگر میں لٹریچر دیکھوں تو لٹریچر میں ہمیں 4 طرح کے مین انسٹرومنٹس ملتے ہیں جو ریگولیٹری اتھارٹیز جو ہیں وہ یوز کرتی ہیں. فرسٹ ون از ڈسکلوجر. ڈسکلوجر از دیٹ it is a tool to resolve the imperfect information problem, but the critical point is that کہ ریگولیٹر ایجنسی نے ڈسکلوجر کا ریگولیشن تو بنا دیا کہ آپ نے لیبل پہ ساری کی ساری انفارمیشن دینی ہے, بٹ جو کنزیومر ہے وہ اس انفارمیشن کو کیسے پروسیس کر رہا ہے, دیٹ از اے کریٹیکل ایشو. دی اینڈ سیکنڈ از ڈسکلوجر از اے کمپلیکس ایشو. سم ٹائمس بہت سی ایسی انفارمیشن ہے جو کمپنیز جو ہیں یا مارکیٹ کا جو بائر سیلر ہے وہ اس طرح پورٹری کر رہا ہوتا ہے کہ وہ کوئی الارم بیل رنگ نہیں ہوتی ہے کنزیومرز کی. اس کی کلاسیکل ایگزامپل ہمارے یہاں سگریٹس ہیں. اف یو گو بیک 10 years تو جو سگریٹس کے اوپر لکھا ہوتا تھا وہ ایسا آپ کو کوئی الارم بیل نہیں ہوتا تھا, وہ لکھا مضر صحت ہے. آہستہ آہستہ ریگولیشنز ٹائٹ ہوتی گئیں, اب وہ جو ہے وہ انہوں نے پکچرز دینا شروع کر دی. اوکے, دی سیکنڈ مین انسٹرومنٹ از ریسٹرکشنز. ریسٹرکشنز ٹو چیک دی پرائس سیٹنگ بیہیویئر آف دا فرمز, کہ فرمز جو ہیں وہ کہیں کلیوڈ کر کے پرائس جو ہے نا وہ سیٹل نہ کریں. بٹ انفارچونیٹلی پاکستان میں فرمز کا پرائس سیٹنگ بیہیویئر چیک کرنے کی بجائے گورنمنٹ جو ہے وہ اٹ سیلف پرائس مارکیٹ جو ہے نا وہ ڈٹرمن کرتی ہے. دیٹ از اے پرابلمٹک تھنگ. اینڈ دی سیکنڈ ریسٹرکشن وچ از موسٹ آفن یوز از اینٹی کمپیٹیٹیو پریکٹسز, کہ جو آپ کی فرمز ہیں وہ ان میں اینٹی کمپیٹیٹیو پریکٹسز نہ ہوں. لیکن بٹ اگین ہیئر از ون ایشو, دا اسپیسیفسٹی آف ریسٹرکشنز, کیونکہ مارکیٹ کے ڈائنامکس جو ہیں وہ بڑے ریپڈلی چینج ہوتے ہیں, اور ریگولیٹری اتھارٹیز کے لیے یہ بہت بڑا چیلنج ہوتا ہے ٹو کیپ اپ ود دا مارکیٹ ڈیولپمنٹس. تو وہ اسپیسیفسٹی آف ریسٹرکشنز جو ہیں اٹ از اے بگ چیلنج. اینڈ دا تھرڈ انسٹرومنٹ از مینڈیٹ, which is an effective way to resolve complex societal problems, جس میں آپ ایکچولی بارگین کرتے ہیں. اس کی کلاسیکل ایگزامپل ہمارے پاس یہ ہے کہ بینکنگ لائسنس کا, کہ گورنمنٹ اس کو آکشن نہیں کرتی ہے, انسٹیڈ اٹ از اے بارگین اگینسٹ ٹو سرو سم انڈر سروڈ community. But again there are some issues in this instrument as well. It is a form of hidden tax, and because it is a bargain, so it lack transparency. And the fourth one is ownership restrictions, just to break up monopolies. یہ ہمارے پاس انسٹرومنٹس ہوتے ہیں. اگر آپ لٹریچر میں دیکھیں تو ریگولیٹری پروسیس اور امپلیمنٹیشن میں ہوتا ایسا ہے کہ لیجسلیٹر جو ہے بیکاز آف لیک آف ایکسپرٹیز آلویز ڈیلیگیٹ دی پاور آف ریگولیشنز ٹو دا ریلیونٹ ریگولیٹری اتھارٹیز. اب ریگولیٹری اتھارٹیز جو ہے ان کے پاس پاور آ جاتی ہے, وہ ریگولیشنز کو فریم کرتے ہیں. بٹ ہیئر کمس دی ڈیموکریٹک اکاؤنٹیبلٹی, because the chances are there that one particular regulatory authority may be hijacked by special interest groups. ٹھیک ہے, تو وہ وہاں پہ ایشوز آتے ہیں کہ آپ کی جو اسپیشل انٹرسٹ گروپ ہے وہ بہت زیادہ ایکٹیو ہو جاتے ہیں. اینڈ دین دی سیکنڈ پرابلم از امپلیمنٹیشن. موسٹ ایز ان کیس آف پاکستان وی ہیو ویری گڈ پالیسیز. ہمارے پاس پالیسیز بڑی اچھی ہوتی ہیں, پیپر پہ ویل ڈیزائنڈ ہوتی ہیں, لیکن وی آلویز فیل ان امپلیمنٹیشن. ہماری امپلیمنٹیشن جو ہے وہ ان ایڈیکویٹ ہوتی ہے. ادھر اس کی ملٹیپل ریزنس ہیں, اس پہ ابھی ٹائم نہیں ہے, ہم لیٹر آن ڈسکس کریں گے. نو کمنگ بیک فرام لٹریچر, کمنگ بیک ٹو Pakistan, I will be very brief because I'm running out of time. If we look at the regulatory framework of Pakistan, this graph shows the quality of regulations in Pakistan. Pakistan is the second on the bottom. So here is Pakistan. So this graph shows that کہ جو ہمارا ریگولیٹری فریم ورک ہے اس کی کوالٹی کوئی بہت اچھی نہیں ہے. اسی طرح ایک اور انڈیکیٹر ہے جس میں انہوں نے 127 کنٹریز کو لسٹ کیا اور پاکستان میں 123rd رینک کیا ہے, جس میں ریگولیٹری امپلیمنٹیشن انہوں نے چیک کیا کہ آپ کی ریگولیشنز امپلیمنٹ کتنی ہوتی ہیں. سو ہر لحاظ سے ہماری جو ریگولیشنز ہیں وہ اچھا پرفارم نہیں کر رہی ہیں. پائڈ نے یہاں پہ ایک ڈومیسٹک ایویڈنس پروڈیوس کرنے کے لیے ڈومیسٹیکلی یہ پائڈ سلج آڈٹس کے نام سے ایک سیریز لانچ کی. اس کے بارے میں میرے کولیگ ڈاکٹر فہیم جو ہیں وہ آپ کو مزید بریف کریں گے. Once again, PIDE is producing multiple evidences that our economy is permission economy. So as Dr. Nadeem told you that this is the paper where we estimated that the size of the government footprint is above 70%. And the other document, which is listed regulatory bodies herding growth, here we try to map the regulatory bodies in at the helm of federal government, and our calculation shows that there are more than 118 regulatory bodies only in Islamabad. So these are some of the evidence that we have produced. अब ये सब कुछ करने के बाद जिस मैं अभी तक जिन चीजें पहुंचा हूं कि हमारी रेगुलेशंस में 4 मेन इश्यूज हैं. The first thing is our regulators still focused on command and control. हम अभी तक कमांड एंड कंट्रोल मोड में हैं, हम फैसिलिटेटर के मोड में नहीं आए हैं. हमारा रेगुलेटर मार्केट फैसिलिटेशन नहीं करता है, बल्कि वो मार्केट को कंट्रोल करना चाहता है. एंड सेकंड मेन इशू इज दैट most of our regulators unfortunately have no concept of market development. वो मार्केट की मैकेनिज्म क्या होता है, मार्केट की फंक्शंस कैसे होते हैं, वो उनको मोस्टली concept नहीं होता है. What they are actually looking for is to render more control over the economic activities. And the third main issue is that it is an invisible tax which nobody talked about. हम बहुत बात करते हैं कि पाकिस्तान में इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी बहुत ज्यादा है. उसकी वजह यही है कि फॉर्मल इकोनॉमी में टैक्सेशन ही इतनी ज्यादा है, इनविजिबल टैक्स थ्रू रेगुलेशंस, जो कि पाइड स्लज वॉल्यूम 2 में हमने मेजर किया है. इट्स अराउंड 34% ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट जो आपकी इनविजिबल टैक्स जो आप पे करता है बिजनेस कम्युनिटी थ्रू दीज रेगुलेटरी एजेंसीज. एंड द फोर्थ थिंग इज दैट इट इज द सोर्स ऑफ रेंट. सो दीज आर द 4 मेन इश्यूज related to Pakistan's regulatory framework. Now, coming to some specific example, मैं मतलब मेरा ये मकसद नहीं था कि मैं DTS को highlight करूं कि उनके problems क्या हैं. Just to clarify my point, let's take the example of hotel registration in Islamabad. The Department of Tourism Services is responsible to regulate the hoteling business in Islamabad. No, they are claiming that we have automated our application processes and so on. If you go through their website, the application process described have 5 steps. ये 5 steps हैं बड़े simple से, and you need only 7 documents जो list किए हुए हैं कि ये 7 documents हैं, ये 5 step हैं. It's very smooth process as per they say. लेकिन जब आप on ground in reality check करें, जब आप किसी होटल मालिक से बात करें, then you will realize कि नहीं भाई वो 7 जो डॉक्यूमेंट्स हैं, instead of 7 documents you need 22 documents, and the process takes more than 1.5 years, and it requires 75 trips to different departments, as well as it will cost you more than 1 million rupees. So these are the this is the basic issue. Our regulatory implementation processes are not transparent, even though some regulating agencies are trying to make it transparent, but still we need to work on it. इसी तरह पाइड में जैसे मैंने आपसे कहा कि हम डिफरेंट जो फ्रंट्स हैं इकोनॉमिक उन पे काम करते हैं, उसमें हमने मार्केट पे भी काम किया, और अभी हमने स्टार्ट पे रियल एस्टेट मार्केट को एज अ केस लिया और उस पर हमने स्टडी करना शुरू किया. तो अनफॉर्चुनेटली एट द आउटसेट आई मस्ट कन्फेस कि पाकिस्तान में रियल एस्टेट मार्केट क्या होती है उसका कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं है. अगर रियल एस्टेट मार्केट को मैं डिफाइन करूं कि इट इज द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ रियल एस्टेट, कि रियल एस्टेट लेके आपने उस पर बिल्डिंग बनाई, चाहे रेजिडेंशियल हो, कमर्शियल हो, इंडस्ट्रियल हो, तो वो रियल एस्टेट मार्केट होती है. हमारे यहाँ रियल एस्टेट मार्केट का कांसेप्ट है कि मैंने प्लॉट लिया, मैंने बेच दिया, प्लॉट लिया, बेच दिया, ये रियल एस्टेट है. तो बेस्ड ऑन माय डेफिनेशन व्हाट आई फाउंड दैट वी डोंट हैव एनी फंक्शनल रियल एस्टेट मार्केट इन पाकिस्तान. अच्छा, व्हाटएवर द सेगमेंट ऑफ रियल एस्टेट मार्केट वी हैव इज नॉट डूइंग वेल. So this is the global index of JLL, which shows that the real estate transparency in the real estate market is very low. It is very bad. It is not doing very well. अच्छा, अब यहाँ पे वही again coming back to my points, regulations के PIDE rapid growth strategy है, जो PIDE reform एजेंडा है हमारा. The copies are available outside. वहाँ पे हमने real estate market का detail analysis किया. What we found that there are 4 main issues in the real estate market. The first one is that the information is insufficient. Government जो है वो price control करती है, उसकी वजह से price की information available नहीं है. Land title और rights जो हैं वो vague हैं. And then we have a lengthy dispute settlement process, and the transaction is cumbersome. So ye char main issues the. No, if we look at the regulations in place in the real estate market, none of that regulation address these key issues. ये चार इशू कोई भी रेगुलेशन जो है वो नहीं करती. रेगुलेशंस का मकसद क्या है कि हमने किसी तरह से रेवेन्यू मैक्सिमाइज करना है ओवर द ट्रांजैक्शंस. तो रेवेन्यू मैक्सिमाइजेशन करने के लिए गवर्नमेंट क्या कर रही है? गवर्नमेंट एफबीआर वैल्यूएशन टेबल का इजरा कर रही है. गवर्नमेंट डिस्ट्रिक्ट कलेक्टर रेट दे रही है. सो डीसी रेट इंप्लीमेंट हो रहा है ताकि कैपिटल वैल्यू टैक्स हो जाए, स्टैंप ड्यूटी लग जाए. एफबीआर वैल्यूएशन टेबल आ रहे हैं ताकि कैपिटल गेन टैक्स हम ले सकें, विद होल्डिंग टैक्स ले सकें. कोई भी रेगुलेशन ऐसी नहीं है कि जो इन चार बुनियादी मसाइल के हल के लिए की जाए. सो दिस इज द बिग इशू. देन वी एनालाइज्ड, अच्छा गवर्नमेंट ये जो इंटरवेंशन कर रही है डीसी रेट और एफबीआर रेट की वजह से, क्या ये जो एक्चुअल ऑब्जेक्टिव है गवर्नमेंट का वो अचीव हो भी रहा है या नहीं? एंड द ऑब्जेक्टिव इज मैक्सिमाइज द रेवेन्यू. We did a very small exercise. We picked 2 properties listed at satellite town, block A और block B में. तो हमने चेक किया कि अगर मार्केट प्राइस पे हम टैक्सेशन करें तो क्या रेवेन्यू होगा, और अगर जो डीसी रेट है और एफबीआर रेट है उसकी प्राइस पे करें तो क्या टैक्स रेवेन्यू होगा. एंड वी फाउंड दैट देयर इज अ ह्यूज टैक्स गैप. फॉर एग्जांपल, इन केस ऑफ प्रॉपर्टी 1 देयर इज अ टैक्स गैप ऑफ 1.7 million, and in case of property 2 it is 0.6 million. So the very objective of the regulations, that is the maximize revenue, is not achieving it. Because के अगर आप मार्केट को छोड़ दें, प्राइस डिटरमाइन ना करें, तो मे बी इसके लिए भी हमने एक सोल्यूशन दिया है जो कि हमारा आउटसाइड अवेलेबल है. इन शॉर्ट, समिंग अप, what we are suggesting at PIDE is that Pakistan needs some regulatory management system. और हमें मॉडर्नाइजेशन की, अपने रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क को मॉडर्नाइज करने की जरूरत है. और मॉडर्नाइजेशन का एजेंडा जो है इट इज मच ब्रॉडर देन डीरेगुलेशन एजेंडा. ठीक है. और जो डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज प्लस जिन कंट्रीज ने अपने रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क को मॉडर्नाइज किया, उनका एक्सपीरियंस हमें बताता है कि हमें 4 फ्रंट्स पे मॉडर्नाइजेशन की जरूरत है. द फर्स्ट इज मॉडर्नाइज existing stock of regulations. The second is control the flow. And the third one is develop institutional capacity. Regulators जो हैं उनकी institutional capacity develop करें. And the fourth one is institutionalize the reform drive, जिसमें political will की जरूरत है. इसका सारा डिटेल मैप जो है वो हमने इस डॉक्यूमेंट में चेक आउट किया हुआ है. You will be provided a copy of it. And I must stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Okar, for detailed presentation. I guess what we need is a regulatory authority to regulate these regulations. ये proposal शायद आज ही accept हो जाए. Next presentation is by Dr. Fahim. Dr. Fahim will be sharing the insights about the cost of regulations. PIDE has extensively researched on the bureaucratic frictions hindering the transactions and then obviously squeezing the overall economic activity. Let's have the details from Dr. Fahim. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will not take long. I'll talk about the sludge, the cost of regulations. I basically would like to give you the main concept. कि वो concept क्या है जिस पे हम ये काम कर रहे हैं PIDE के ऊपर. So what is sludge? Sludge जैसे कि दलदल जो कि हमें आए दिन फेस करते हैं जब भी हम किसी परमिट को लेने जाते हैं, लाइसेंस को लेने जाते हैं, एनओसी लेते हैं, कोई कारोबार शुरू करने जाते हैं, तो उस कारोबार में फ्रॉम स्टार्ट टू एंड जो प्रोसेसेस इन्वॉल्व हैं, जो हर्डल्स इन्वॉल्व हैं, जो फ्रिक्शंस इन्वॉल्व हैं, उसको हम स्लज कहते हैं. सो उसका कॉन्सेप्ट बेसिकली क्या है? So usually what we see is when there are inputs and then we see there are outputs and outcomes. For instance, हमने कहा कि जी हमने एक जो बिल्डिंग है वो बनानी है, तो उसके लिए हमें लैंड, लेबर, कैपिटल हमें चाहिए, एंड देन एट द एंड वी कैन सी कि जी देयर इज अ प्रोडक्ट. वो बिल्डिंग की सूरत में है, वो किसी फर्म की सूरत में है, वो किसी फार्मेसी की सूरत में है, किसी स्कूल की सूरत में है. सो देयर इज सम प्रोडक्ट इवेंचुअली जिसका जो है वो सोशल और एक इकोनॉमिक बेनिफिट है जिसे हम देखते हैं. बट व्हाट वी डोंट एक्चुअली सी इन पर्टिकुलर इज कि जो प्रोसेस है, ये जो आपको एरो नजर आ रहा है बीच में, फ्रॉम इनपुट टू आउटपुट, वो प्रोसेस जो है वो कितना स्मूथ था, اس میں ٹائم ایفیشنسی کیا تھی, اس میں جو ریسورس ایلوکیشنز تھی اور اس کی ریسورس موبلائزیشن کی جو ایفیشنسی تھی وہ کیا تھی, اس کے ساتھ یہ کہ اس میں ہرڈلز کیا تھے, اس میں فرکشنز کیا تھیں, اس میں ڈیلیز کتنی تھی, اس میں ریڈ ٹیپ کتنا تھا, اس میں رینٹ سیکنگ کتنی تھی, اس میں پرمیشنز کتنی تھی, NOCs اینڈ سو مینی تھنگس. دس از پرٹیکولرلی کالڈ دا بلیک باکس. آپ نے کسی بھی سسٹم کے اندر اگر پروسیسز کو انڈرسٹینڈ کرنا ہے اور ان پروسیسز کو بہتر بنانا ہے, سو یو نیڈ ٹو ایکسپلور, یو نیڈ ٹو اوپن دس بلیک باکس which is somewhere between the inputs and the outputs. So this is where we come in, جہاں پہ PIDE نے جو ہے یہ کانسیپٹ اڈاپٹ کیا کیس سینسٹین کا, جو کہ پروفیسر ہیں ہارورڈ یونیورسٹی کے, ان کی کتاب بھی ہے نچ کے اوپر. سو ان سے ہم نے یہ کانسیپٹ اڈاپٹ کیا, ان کے ہم نے ویبینارز بھی کیے, PST کانفرنس پہ ان کے انوائٹڈ لیکچرز بھی ہوئے, اور اس کو ہم نے پاکستان میں دیکھنا شروع کیا کہ جو پبلک سیکٹر مینجمنٹ ہے, جو پروسیسز ہیں, پروسیجرز ہیں, اس کے اندر کتنی جو ہے وہ ہرڈلز انوالو ہیں. سو واٹ وی ڈیڈ از کہ ہم نے 3 چیزیں کیلکولیٹ کی. ہم نے ایک کیلکولیٹ کیا ٹائم فرام دا اسٹارٹ ٹل دا اینڈ, کتنا ٹائم لگتا ہے. وی کیلکولیٹڈ کہ جو ریسورسز ہیں, جو فائنانسز ہیں, جو پیسہ آپ کا لگ رہا ہے, وہ فرام دا اسٹارٹ ٹل دا اینڈ وہ کتنا ایکسپینس آپ کو کر رہا ہے. اینڈ فائنلی جو آپ کی انرجیز اور آپ کی جو اسٹریس انوالو ہے اس پورے پروسیس کو اسٹارٹ سے لے کے فنش تک کمپلیٹ کرنے کا, وہ کتنا ہے. اور جب ہم ان تینوں چیزوں کو دیکھتے ہیں تو ایکچولی ہمیں جو ایک اور چیز بہت امپورٹنٹ ملتی ہے, دس از اپرچونٹی کاسٹ. اس کی میں بھی آپ کو ایک ایگزامپل دوں گا. سو والیوم 1 جو ہے صرف ابھی آپ کو ہم دکھا رہے ہیں کہ یہ ڈسٹریبیوٹ بھی کر رہے ہیں, 2 ہم ابھی تک والیومز کمپلیٹ کر چکے ہیں جس میں 12 ہم نے ایکٹیویٹیز کو پک کیا ہے. صرف والیوم 1 جو ہے وہ بتاتا ہے کہ 39% جو ہے وہ آپ کی کاسٹ ہے GDP کی. 39% آف GDP جو ہے وہ آپ کو کاسٹ کر رہا ہے سلج جو ہے, والیوم 1 بتا رہا ہے. والیوم 2 6%. اوور آل دیکھیں اب تک ہم نے جتنی ایکٹیویٹیز کی ہیں, اٹس اراؤنڈ 45% آف دا GDP آپ کا جو پیسہ ہے, انرجیز ہیں, ایفرٹس ہیں, سب کچھ ہے, وہ آپ کو کاسٹ کر رہا ہے. Now let me take you to the one example which is in volume 1. ہم نے کیلکولیٹ کیا کہ اسلام آباد میں بلیو ایریا میں we would like to build a high rise building. سو ہم نے کہا چلیں جس کا ہم پروسیس دیکھتے ہیں کتنا ہے, ICT اور CDA اس میں تھا. سو وی ہیو سین کہ وہاں پہ جو ہے بلڈنگ پلان آپ کو چاہیے, آپ کو NOC چاہیے, آپ کو EPA سے اپروول چاہیے, آپ کو سول ایویشن والوں سے اپروول چاہیے, گراؤنڈ اپروولس چاہیے, آپ کو سینیٹیشن کا چاہیے. ابھی یہ صرف پرمیشن کی جو ہے میں آپ کو بتا رہا ہوں, یہ پرمیشن ہے کہ ہاں جی ناؤ یو کین اسٹارٹ بلڈنگ, کنسٹرکٹنگ یور بلڈنگ. ٹھیک ہے. سو وٹ یو سی از ہیئر از کہ اراؤنڈ 4.5 سال آپ کو صرف پرمیشن لینے میں لگ گئے کہ اچھا جی اب آپ کو اجازت ہے کہ اب آپ بلڈنگ کھڑی کریں. اٹ یوزلی ٹیکس اگین ایڈیشنل 3 years. اس کا مطلب ہے 7.5 سال آپ کو بلیو ایریا میں لگتے ہیں ایک بلڈنگ کھڑی کرنے میں. اور اس کی اگر ہم نے سلج کاسٹ جو کہ پوری ڈیٹیل کے ساتھ موجود ہے, اٹس اراؤنڈ 77% آف دا ٹوٹل پروجیکٹ. ٹھیک ہے. اب ناؤ امیجن کہ اگر 7.5 سال کی جگہ یہ بلڈنگ 1.5 سال میں کمپلیٹ ہو جاتی, دیٹ مینس کہ وہ 6 سال اس نے آپ کو ایک اپرچونٹی کاسٹ کریٹ کی. اٹ مینس کہ وہاں پہ جاب لاس ہوئی, اٹ مینس کہ وہاں پہ رینٹ لاس ہوا. ٹھیک ہے. اس نے اکنامک کنٹریبیوشن اس طرح نہیں کی اس پروجیکٹ نے. ان 6 سالوں میں آپ 6 اور بلڈنگز ایسے ہی کھڑی کر سکتے تھے, آپ ایکسپینڈ کر سکتے تھے, بٹ کیا سلج نے آپ کو وہ اسپیس نہیں دی کہ وہ آپ یہ سارا کام کر سکے. ناؤ اف یو سی کہ جو کاسٹ آف سلج ہے وہ پروجیکٹ کا 77.26% اسپیسیفک ایکٹیویٹی کا, اس کا پھر ہمارا فردر بریک ڈاؤن ہے. آپ کی جب ڈیلیز ہوتی ہیں آپ کا کنسٹرکشن مٹیریل ایکسپینسو ہو جاتا ہے. آپ کی ڈیلیز جو ہے پرمیشنز کی وجہ سے جو ہے انکمز جو ہے اس کے اندر آتی ہیں چیزیں. پھر جو آپ نے اگر میں نے جیسے کہا کہ 1.5 سال میں بھی اگر آپ کمپلیٹ کر رہے تھے تو 6 سال میں جو آپ نے انکم جنریٹ کرنی تھی اس پروجیکٹ سے وہ آپ نے لوز کر دیا, آپ نے امپلائمنٹ لوز کر دی, آپ نے اکنامک جو اپرچونٹی کریٹ کرنی تھی وہ لوز کر دی. سو دیر از اے لاٹ آف کاسٹ انکلوڈ ود دیز کائنڈ آف سلج جو ہم نے ایکٹیویٹیز کی ہے. اور جو امپورٹنٹ چیز ہے وہ ہمارے سلج ڈاکومنٹ کی وہ یہ ہے کہ ہم ایک ٹپیکل ایکڈیمک پیپر کی طرح ہم یہ نہیں کہہ رہے کہ آپ کو اس چیز کو بہتر بنانا ہے, ہم آپ کو بتا رہے ہیں اسپیسیفکلی کہ آپ نے کیا بہتر بنانا ہے, آپ نے کیسے کون سے کمپوننٹ کو کس اسٹیپ کو آپ ڈیجیٹائز کر سکتے ہیں, کس کو آپ شارٹن کر سکتے ہیں, کس کو بہتر ایفیشینٹ کر سکتے ہیں, اینڈ دین ہم نے اس کو کیلکولیٹ کیا ہے کہ اس کی وجہ سے بہتری کتنی آ سکتی ہے سلج کو ریڈیوس کرنے میں. سو یہ ہماری 2 رپورٹس ہیں جی, اب تک اویلیبل ہیں. 3rd رپورٹ از ان پروسیس, اور اس کی اتنی ڈیمانڈ تھی کہ وی آر آلسو ایگزیکیوٹنگ دیز سلج ایکٹیویٹیز ان 4 provinces. So we are getting 10 studies each from Karachi, Lahore, Quetta and Peshawar also, because وہاں کے provinces سے ہمیں یہ ڈیمانڈ ہے کہ they also would like to learn and see کہ اس سے ہم چیزوں کو بہتر کیسے بنا سکتے ہیں. So I thank you all of you for being here. This is the prime objective کہ ہم یہاں بیٹھ کے ان موضوعات کو کھل کے ڈسکس کریں, انڈرسٹینڈ کریں, اور ہم مل کے چیزوں کو بہتر بنا سکیں. تھینک یو.
تھینک یو ڈاکٹر فہیم. ابھی ڈاکٹر فہیم نے جو آپ کو بتایا کہ اٹ واز اڈاپٹیڈ بائی پروفیسر ایٹ ہارورڈ یونیورسٹی کارسنسٹین, ان کی ٹویٹ آئی تھی کہ ہم نے تو ایک کتاب لکھی تھی, اٹ واز این آئیڈیا, اور آپ لوگوں نے تو سلج آڈٹ اسٹارٹ کیا ہوا ہے. سو ہی سیڈ کہ similar work should be done for the US and other countries as well. So PIDE took the lead in this sense. Now I would invite Dr. Zulfikar Ali from he is the Director General Policy Reforms and Legal Board of Investment. He would present about Pakistan's regulatory modernization initiative. So PIDE is working closely with BOI to carry out evidence-based reforms to slash excessive reform. And recently, BOI has undertook 150 plus reforms towards enabling business environment. So we would like to hear more from Dr. Zulfikar Ali Saab. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum ji. First of all, I would like to thank you on behalf of Board Investment for all of you to turning up for this very important workshop. What we have already listened is quite bleak and very frightening, but I'll show you something which you can say that the light at the end of the tunnel. I'll give you a brief account on the activities which we are performing in Board of Investment under the Pakistan Regulatory Modernization Initiative. یہ جتنا بھی ابھی آپ کو سارا کچھ بتایا گیا یہ بڑا لٹریری ایکیڈیمک اور بکش نالج تھا, لیکن یہ چیزوں کو سمجھنے کے لیے آپ سب کو یہ بھی پتہ ہونا چاہیے کہ ریگولیشنز ہوتی کیوں ہیں اور یہ بنتی کیسے ہیں. آپ کو پتہ ہے کہ پاکستان کے اندر جو مدر لا ہے وہ کانسٹیٹیوشن آف اسلامک ریپبلک آف پاکستان ہے, جو کہ پاور دیتا ہے لیجسلیشن کرنے کے لیے, اور پھر جو لیجسلیشن ہوتی ہے اس کے تحت بیوروکریسی مختلف رولز اور ریگولیشنز بناتی ہیں. تو بالکل ڈن اوے ود دی ریگولیشنز جو ہے وہ اس وقت بڑا مشکل ہوگا ہمارے لیے کہ ہم اس سے بالکل ڈی ریگولیشن پہ چلے جائیں. فی الحال ہمیں رولز اینڈ ریگولیشن بنانے پڑیں گے کچھ بزنسز کو چلانے کے لیے. اور اس کا ریگولیٹ کرنا کیوں ضروری ہے, یہ ریشنل بھی سمجھنا بڑا ضروری ہے. بالکل سویپنگ سٹیٹمنٹ دے دینا کہ جی ریگولیشنز کو ختم کر دیا جائے وہ ممکن نہیں ہے. اس کی 2 وجوہات ہیں. ایک تو یہ ہے کہ یہ ہیلتھ سیفٹی اور فیئر ٹریٹمنٹ آف ورکرز کے لیے بڑا ضروری ہے بزنس کے اندر. پروٹیکشن آف انٹرسٹ ہوتا ہے سٹیزن کا پبلک گڈس کے اندر, اس لیے بھی ہم ریگولیٹ کرتے ہیں. ریگولیشن انشور کرتی ہیں پروٹیکشن اینڈ سسٹینیبل یوز آف اویلیبل ریسورسز, اور لیول پلینگ فیلڈ بھی دیتی ہیں تمام بزنسز کو کام کرنے کے لیے. اس کے علاوہ پاکستان باقی ملکوں کی طرح بہت سارے انٹرنیشنل کنونشنز کا سگنیٹری ہے, جس میں ILO شامل ہے, بیزل کنونشن ہے, WTO کی اپنی بہت ساری آبلیگیشنز ہوتی ہیں کسی ملک کے اوپر, پھر WIPO ہے, FATF ہے, اور UDHR ہے, جس کی وجہ سے ہمیں ریگولیشنز بنانی پڑیں گی. تو ریگولیشنز تو بنیں گی, لیکن ہم جو کام کرنے جا رہے ہیں اس کے بارے میں آپ کو بتاتے ہیں. اس وقت جو سچویشن پاکستان کے اندر ہے اس کو سمجھنا بھی بڑا ضروری ہے کہ اس وقت جو کمپلائنس برڈن ہے بزنسز کے اوپر وہ بہت زیادہ ہے ٹائم اور کاسٹ کے لحاظ سے, جو کہ کمپلائی کرنا پڑتا ہے بزنسز کو. 3 tiered ہمارا کمپلائنس کا سٹرکچر ہے. 3 طرح کی گورنمنٹ ہمارے یہاں کام کرتی ہے. فیڈرل گورنمنٹ ہے, پروونشل گورنمنٹ ہے, اور لوکل گورنمنٹ ہے, اور ہر گورنمنٹ کے اپنے اپنے ریگولیٹرز بھی موجود ہیں. اور ایک اندازے کے مطابق یہ سینکڑوں کی تعداد میں ہے, 120 کے قریب تو صرف فیڈرل لیول پہ ہمارے پاس ریگولیٹرز ہیں جو موسٹلی بزنسز کو ریگولیٹ کرتے ہیں. ہمارے ہاں پرمیٹیو لاز ہیں, رولز ہیں, موسٹلی پیپر بیسڈ ہیں, اور ایسے لاز بھی ہیں جو پری پارٹیشن ہیں. اوور لیپنگ ریگولیشنز ہیں, بہت ساری ریگولیٹرز ایک قسم کی ہی ریگولیشنز کر رہے ہوتے ہیں جس کے لیے بزنسز کو دونوں تینوں جگہ پہ جانا پڑتا ہے. لیک آف انفارمیشن ہے, موسٹلی بزنسز کو نہیں پتا ہوتا کہ کون سی ریگولیشن ان کے اوپر لاگو ہوتی ہے. اس کے علاوہ ہمارے پاس جو انسرٹنٹی ہے, ہائیلی انسرٹن آؤٹ کمز فار بزنسز آف انٹریکشن ود ریگولیٹر. بزنسز کو یہ بھی نہیں پتا ہوتا کہ میں ان کے ساتھ جب کام کروں گا تو میرا آؤٹ کم کیا ہو سکتا ہے. اور اس کے علاوہ آج تک پاکستان کے اندر کوئی کنسرٹڈ ایفرٹ نہیں ہوئی ریگولیشنز کو بہتر کرنے کے حوالے سے. تو بورڈ آف انویسٹمنٹ نے یہ ایک بیڑا اٹھایا ہے, کیونکہ آپ کو پتا ہوگا ایز آف ڈوئنگ بزنس کا ایک ورلڈ بینک کا انیشیٹو تھا جو 2020 میں ختم ہو گیا. اس کے بعد فیڈرل گورنمنٹ نے بورڈ آف انویسٹمنٹ کو مینڈیٹڈ کیا ہے کہ یہ پاکستان ریگولیٹری ماڈرنائزیشن انیشیٹو کے اوپر کام کرے, اور یہ پورے ملک کے لیے ہم کام کر رہے ہیں, 2 شہروں کے لیے کام نہیں کر رہے. تو آبجیکٹو ہو جو PRMI ہے بڑا سمپل ہے کہ ٹو ایلیمینیٹ unnecessary regulations and simplify complex procedures in order to create business friendly climate for SME sector. آپ کو پتا ہے کہ 90% کے قریب جو ہمارا بزنسز ہے وہ SMEs کے اوپر کنسسٹ کرتا ہے. تو ہم نے جو جس طرح ڈاکٹر صاحب نے کہا ہے کہ unnecessary regulation کو eliminate کرنا ہے, complex procedures کو simplify کرنا ہے, اور SME سیکٹر کے لیے بزنس فرینڈلی کلائمیٹ کو لے کے آنا ہے. بڑا سمپل سا آبجیکٹو ہے, یہ ہم اکیلے نہیں کر پائیں گے. آپ سب لوگوں کو آج بلانے کا مقصد یہ تھا کہ جتنے بھی ریگولیٹرز ہیں ہمارے ساتھ ہینڈ ہولڈنگ کریں اور بزنسز کے لیے ایز پیدا کریں. اگر آپ دیکھیں تو اس طرح کا کام بہت سے ملکوں نے کیا ہے اور اس کا ان کو بہت زیادہ فائدہ بھی ہوا ہے. جس طرح ڈاکٹر صاحب نے انڈیا کی مثال دی تھی, تو ہم نے کچھ اور مثالیں لی ہیں کہ ویتنام نے 3 سالوں میں کوئی 77% کے قریب ریگولیشن کو سمپلیفائی کیا. ساؤتھ کوریا نے 11 مہینے میں 21% ریگولیشن کو سمپلیفائی کیا. کینیا اور کرویشیا نے بھی اسی طرح اپنی ریگولیشن کو کم کیا, اور اس کے بہت سارے اکنامک گینز ہوئے ان کو, اکانومی کو ان کے بہت سارے پیسے ہی بچے اور ٹائم بھی بچا, جو کہ ڈالر ٹرمز میں ایک بڑی اچھی خاصی ویلیو بنتی ہے اس کی. ہماری جو PRMI اسٹریٹجی ہے, ہم ایک PRMI اسٹریٹجی ہم نے کیبنٹ کی اور PRMI اسٹیئرنگ کمیٹی کی اپروول سے بنائی تھی, اس کے اوپر کام کر رہے ہیں. اس کے 4 میجر سٹیپس ہیں یا پلرز ہیں. We usually carry out mapping of all business regulation laws and make them available online. یہ ہمارا آبجیکٹو ہے اس کے لیے. Step 2 میں ہم کرتے ہیں جی analyze the relevance and usefulness of all business regulations laws through consultation. Then we eliminate unnecessary regulation and simplify compliance requirements through consultation. And finally, we are going to automate compliance with business regulations, ensure e-payments of all relevant charges. تو یہ بڑا سمپل تھا ہمارا 4 سٹیپس کے اندر اگر ہم اس کو اسٹریٹجی کو بیان کریں تو یہ ہماری PRMI کی اسٹریٹجی ہے. آبجیکٹیوز جو ہیں ہمارے 6 بیسیکلی آبجیکٹیوز ہیں. We are going to create a digital catalog of federal, provincial and local regulations via e-registry. We are going to adopt a unified set of principles and methodological approach for simplification. ہم نے principles بنا لیے ہیں ریگولیٹرز کے لیے, اس کو لانچ کر دیے ہیں. میرے خیال تمام ریگولیٹرز کو USBs مل گئی ہوں گی جس کے اندر ہم نے پرنسپلز جو ہیں جو بنائے ہیں ریگولیٹرز کے لیے وہ ہم نے ان کو دیے ہیں. اس کے اوپر ہم ورکشاپس بھی کرنے جا رہے ہیں. We are going to simplify the regulations through a collaborative and consultative mechanism. آج کی ورکشاپ بھی collaborative اور consultative process کا حصہ ہے. We are going to eliminate unnecessary regulations through regulatory bulletin. We are going to develop Pakistan Business Portal, which is an e-platform for end-to-end compliance of business regulation, including e-payments. And we are trying to develop institutions to anchor reform process and enhance coordination. ہم اس میں فوکل پرسنز بھی لے رہے ہیں, ریفارم چیمپئنز بھی لے رہے ہیں جو ہمارے بیہاف پہ اپنے اپنے اداروں کے اندر ریگولیشنز کو سمپلیفائی کریں گے اور بزنسز کے لیے آسانی پیدا کریں گے. فنکشنل اسٹرکچر میں دیکھیں تو ہمارا جو PRMI اسٹیئرنگ کمیٹی ہے, اٹ از بیسڈ اینڈ ہاؤسڈ ان بورڈ آف انویسٹمنٹ, اور اس کے علاوہ تمام صوبوں کے اندر اور فیڈریٹنگ یونٹس کے اندر بھی ورکنگ گروپس اس کے کام کر رہے ہیں. ہم نے دوبارہ سے اس کو ری ایکٹیویٹ کیا ہے, تمام جگہ پہ گئے ہیں اور پروونشل ورکنگ گروپس کی میٹنگز کروائی ہیں, اور ورکنگ گروپس کو ہم نے کہا ہے کہ اس کی یہ ریکانسٹیٹیوشن ہوگی کہ چیف سیکرٹریز جو چیئر کریں گے تاکہ ہائیسٹ لیول پہ یہ کام سر انجام پائے. اس کے علاوہ ہم نے ان کو کہا کہ منتھلی میٹنگز کریں اور ہر مہینے کے 7 تاریخ تک ہمیں رپورٹ دیں. تو یہ کچھ پرپوز TORs ہیں. انہوں نے 5 RLCOs کو ریگولیٹری ریفارمز کرنی ہے اور ماڈرنائز کرنی ہے کوارٹرلی بیسس پہ. انشور کرنا ہے کہ یہ PIUs بنائیں اپنے اپنے پروونشل اور ریجنل ہبس کے اندر اپنے ADP سے, اور پروونشل ریجنل گورنمنٹس ٹو پرووائڈ ٹائم لائنس فار آٹومیشن آف RLCOs اور ریسپیکٹو ون اسٹاپ شاپس. تو تمام صوبوں کو لے کے ہم اس پہ کام کریں گے. ہم نے ایک اور کام کیا کہ تمام صوبوں کو کہا کہ اپنی RLCO کی میپنگ کریں. اس میں بہت ساری گلیئرنگ ڈفرینسیشنز ہمارے پاس آئی کہ ایک ہی ڈپارٹمنٹ ہے لیکن مختلف صوبوں کے اندر اس کے مختلف ریگولیشنز ہیں, جس کے لیے ہم ایک جوائنٹ کمیٹی بنا رہے ہیں فوکل پرسنز کی, جو کہ ہمیں ریکمینڈ کرے گی ایلیمینیشن اور سمپلیفیکیشن یہ فوکل پرسنز کی, کہ اس کو کیسے ہم انکنسسٹنسیز کو دور کیا جا سکتا ہے. ہمارا جو میجر کام ہے پرائیویٹ سیکٹر سے بات کرتے ہیں اور ان سے انپٹ لے کے تو اپنی ریفارمز کو آئیڈینٹیفائی کرتے ہیں. تقریباً تمام بڑی انڈسٹری جو پرائیویٹ سیکٹر میں ہے اس سے ہم بات کر چکے ہیں اور ان کی ایسوسیشن سے ہم انپٹ لیتے ہیں. اگر میں آپ کو ریفارم اپڈیٹ دوں تو انہی بزنس ایسوسیشن سے 270 قریب ہم نے ریفارمز کو ٹیک اپ کیا. 151 ہم نے امپلیمنٹ کر لی ہیں. انڈر امپلیمنٹیشن 110 ہے. 4 راؤنڈز ہم کر چکے ہیں. بہت تیزی سے کام ہو رہا ہے اور اس کی وجہ سے بزنسز کو ایز بھی مل رہی ہے. اس کے علاوہ جس طرح میں آپ کو پہلے بتا چکا ہوں, فیڈرل کیبنٹ کی اپروول سے ہم یہ کچھ پرنسپلس فائنلائز کر چکے ہیں کہ اب آئندہ جتنے ریگولیشنز بنیں گے وہ ٹرانسپیرنٹ ہوں گے, رسک مینجمنٹ ان کی دیکھی جائے گی, ایفیشینٹ ہوں گے, پروپورشنیٹ ہوں گے, سمپل ہوں گے اور ریگولیٹری ڈیلیوری ہوگی. ہم نے ایگزسٹنگ ریگولیشن کے لیے ریگولیٹرز کو 6 مہینے کا ٹائم دیا کہ ریویو کر لیں اور وہ ایلیمینیٹ کر دیں ریڈنڈنٹ اور نیڈلیس ریگولیشنز کو, اور سمپلیفائی اور ماڈرنائز کمبرسم پروسیجرز کو بھی کریں. اس کے علاوہ ہم 2 دن کی ورکشاپ کر رہے ہیں مئی کے اندر. ڈیٹس کچھ فائنل ابھی نہیں ہوئی, لیکن اس میں ہم پرائیویٹ سیکٹر کی مدد سے مینٹورز پرووائڈ کریں گے. 100+ ریگولیٹرز کو ہم ٹرین کریں گے اور ان کو بتائیں گے کہ آپ سیلف اسیسمنٹ کیسے کر سکتے ہیں اپنے اپنے سیکٹر کی ریگولیشنز کے حوالے سے, اور اس ساری پروگرس کو ہم فیڈرل کیبنٹ کو بھی پریزنٹ کریں گے. کیپیسٹی بلڈنگ کی ورکشاپ ہم ریگولیٹرز کی پہلے بھی کر چکے ہیں, IFC کے تعاون سے بڑی سکسیزفل رہی ہیں اور یہ مئی میں ہم پھر کرنے جا رہے ہیں. ایک اور کام جس طرح ڈاکٹر صاحب کہتے ہیں کہ 0 ٹائم ٹو اسٹارٹ پالیسی ہے کہ بغیر کسی NOC کے ہم بزنسز کو کام کرنے کی اجازت دیں, تو اس کے اوپر بھی بورڈ آف انویسٹمنٹ نے فیڈرل لیول پہ پالیسی بنا لی ہے which will replace NOCs with the compliance verification process to be risk based, developing the regulatory risk assessment model and classification of SMEs, or it will reduce inspector SME interaction through risk assessment and self declaration. بڑا آسان ہو جائے گا SMEs کے لیے, ان کو NOC رجیم ختم کر دیا جائے گا, سیلف ڈیکلریشن ہوگی, رسک اسیسمنٹ ماڈلز, ٹائم باؤنڈ اپروولز ہوں گی. انسپیکشن پورٹل پہ ہم کام کر رہے ہیں, سیمپل بیسڈ انسپیکشن, ڈیجیٹائزیشن آف کمپلائنس ریکوائرمنٹ, امپیکٹ فوکس ریگولیٹری ریجیمز. تو ایٹ لیسٹ SMEs کے لیے ہم NOCs کو ختم کرنے جا رہے ہیں, اور یہ اس کا ایک ماڈل ہے کہ لو رسک, میڈیم رسک اور ہائی رسک کے اندر لیول آف ڈیلنگ کیا ہوگی, کمپلائنس ریکوائرمنٹس کیا ہوں گی اور ٹائم لائنس کیا ہوں گی. اس کے علاوہ ایک بہت امپورٹنٹ کام جو ہم کرنے جا رہے ہیں وہ ریگولیٹری امپیکٹ اسیسمنٹ کا مینول بنانے جا رہے ہیں. یہ آپ کو پتہ ہے کہ RIA ایک سسٹمیٹک پالیسی ٹول ہوتا ہے جو کہ کوالٹی کنٹرول بھی ہوتا ہے, یہ ایویڈنس بیسڈ ہوتا ہے اور یہ ٹرانسپیرنٹ ہوتا ہے. اس کے کانسیکوینسز اگر آپ دیکھیں کہ RIA نہ کریں تو انفیکٹو ریگولیشنز ہوتی ہیں, مس ہینڈلنگ آف پرابلمز ہوتی ہیں, مس میچ ود آبجیکٹیوز ہوتا ہے, اوور لیپنگ ریگولیشن ہوتی ہے, پور ڈیزائن اور ایڈورس کانسیکوینسز ہوتے ہیں. اس وجہ سے ہم چاہتے ہیں کہ ریگولیٹر جو ہے RIA کا ضرور کام کریں, ریگولیٹری امپیکٹ اسیسمنٹ کام کریں. اس کے لیے ہم ان کو مینوز بنا کے دیں گے انشاءاللہ. یہ فریم ورک ہوگا, کافی ڈیٹیل میں اس کے بارے میں بات کی جا سکتی ہے, لیکن مینول ڈیولپ ہو رہا ہے تو اس کی یہ ایک شکل بنے گی. ہم ایک اور کام کر رہے ہیں, آسان کاروبار ایکٹ ایک لے کے آ رہے ہیں. اس وقت وہ تیار ہے, منسٹری آف لاء میں ہے. اس میں ہماری کوشش یہ کہ ایک رجسٹری ہو جس میں تمام ادارے جو بزنسز کو ڈیل کرتے ہیں وہ اپنے ریگولیشنز کو میپ کر دیں, اور اس کو پھر ہم دیکھیں کہ آفٹر ڈیڈ لائن فرسٹ فیز میں ہم اس کو ایلیمینیٹ کر دیں اگر وہ اس کے اندر میپ نہیں ہوئے, اور جو ریگولیشن اس کے اندر میپ ہوئی ہیں تو اس کو ہم چیک کریں کہ وہ لیگلی بیکڈ ہیں, نیسیسری ہیں یا بزنس فرینڈلی ہیں. اگر تو وہ لیگلی بیکڈ نہیں ہیں تو اس کو ایلیمینیٹ کر دیتے ہیں, اگر وہ نیسیسری تو اس کو مینٹین کریں گے, اور بزنس فرینڈلی کرنے کے لیے اس کو ہم سمپلیفائی بھی کریں گے اور اس کے ملٹیپل راؤنڈس کرتے جائیں گے اور یہ کام ہمارا ہوتا جائے گا. پائڈ کے ساتھ ہماری کولیبوریشن یہ ہے کہ پائڈ کے ساتھ مل کے ہم نے ان کو ڈریپ کے حوالے سے کچھ ریفارمز کی تھیں. اس کے بارے میں انہوں نے کچھ ریسرچ کی اور بتایا کہ یہ 7 جو ریفارمز کرنے سے 1 سال کے اندر جو فارماسیوٹیکل سیکٹر ہے اس کو 6 بلین روپیز کا فائدہ ہوتا ہے کاسٹ اور ٹائم کی سیونگ کے لحاظ سے. کچھ اور کام ہم کر رہے ہیں, یہ بھی بتانا بڑا ضروری ہے. یونیفائڈ بزنس رجسٹریشن کے اوپر کام کر رہے ہیں. آپ کو پتہ ہے کہ انٹیگریٹڈ بزنس رجسٹریشن اگر ہو جائے ایک ہی جگہ پہ آپ کو انفارمیشن دینی پڑے, یہ کریٹ کرے گا انیبلنگ بزنس انوائرمنٹ. ہم نے SCCP کے ساتھ آلریڈی کو 12 سروسز کو انٹیگریٹ کر دیا ہے. MOU ہم نے سائن کروایا تھا فیڈرل لیول پہ PSEP, پاکستان انجینئرنگ کونسل اور STZA کا SCCP کے ساتھ, وہ بھی بالکل آن لائن ہونے والے ہیں. اور یہ بالکل اوائڈ کرے گا ریپیٹیٹیو رجسٹریشن کو اور انیبل کرے گا ایکسچینج آف انٹر آرگنائزیشنل انفارمیشن کو ایک ہی جگہ پہ ایک ہی بار میں. یہ ہم KP گورنمنٹ کے ساتھ کچھ ہم کام کر رہے ہیں, کاسٹ کٹنگ آرگنائزیشن کے ساتھ کام کر رہے ہیں. آسان کاروبار پورٹل جو KP BOI کا ہے, جس میں KPSC, KP لیبر ڈپارٹمنٹ, KP انڈسٹری ڈپارٹمنٹ, KP ایکسائز اینڈ ٹیکسیشن, آفیسیل ٹیکس رجسٹریشن جو پروونسز کی ہے, تمام ریونیوز اتھارٹیز کو بھی ہم انٹیگریٹ کر رہے ہیں ایک ہی جگہ پہ. ہم نے ایک اور کام کیا ہے کہ ہم نے دیکھا کہ فیڈرل گورنمنٹ میں کیا IT ریڈینس ہے اس وقت. اگر ہم تمام ریگولیشنز کو آٹومیٹ کر دیں تو بڑے ڈسمل ہمارے پاس ریزلٹس آئے کہ بہت کم آرگنائزیشنز ہیں جو اس وقت IT ریڈی ہیں تاکہ ان کی ہم سروسز کو آٹومیٹ کر سکیں. یہ اس کا کوئی خاکہ ہے جو آپ کو دکھا رہا ہوں. اور اس کے اندر ریکمنڈیشنز یہی ہیں کہ جو بزنس فرینڈلی ویب سائٹس ہیں اور ڈیجیٹلائزیشن ریگولیٹری ریکوائرمنٹس اور فیڈ بیک سسٹمز کو کم از کم ان پلیس کریں تمام کے تمام ریگولیٹرز جو ہیں. اس کے لیے ہارڈ ویئر, سافٹ ویئر اور ٹرینڈ ہیومن ریسورس کا بندوبست کریں اپنے خرچے سے. یہ ہمارا جو اسمارٹ کا پروجیکٹ ابھی آ رہا ہے جس کو ہم بڑی جلدی اسٹارٹ کرنے جا رہے ہیں, وچ از کالڈ سیکٹر میپنگ اینڈ ریگولیٹری ٹرانسفارمیشن. یہ کوئی 3 سال کا پروجیکٹ ہے ٹو کیری آؤٹ ایکٹیویٹیز. اور یہ اس میں ہم کمپریہنسو میپنگ کریں گے اور ریفارمز کریں گے سارے اننیسیسری ریگولیشنز کے حوالے سے. پروجیکٹ کی جو ٹوٹل کاسٹ ہے 460 بلین ہے. اس کی فنڈنگ ہمیں DDWP سے مل چکی ہے ہمیں. اچھا جی, یہ آپ سب کے لیے ایک بڑی ضروری چیز ہے. ہماری ایک ڈیڈیکیٹڈ ویب سائٹ ہے وچ از کالڈ business.gov.pk. اس پہ تمام جتنی بھی ریفارمز ہم نے کی ہیں اس کی ڈیٹیل موجود ہے. پہلے کیا مشکلات تھی اور ریفارم ہونے کے بعد کیا آسانی آئی ہے. اس کے علاوہ بزنس کمیونٹی اپنی ڈیفیکلٹیز کو یہاں پہ رپورٹ بھی کر سکتے ہیں. اس پہ فیڈ بیک کا بھی سسٹم اویلیبل ہے. ہماری آسان کاروبار کی موبائل ایپ بھی اویلیبل ہے جو اپنے موبائل فون پہ آپ ڈاؤن لوڈ کر سکتے ہیں, اور ریفارم ٹریکنگ سسٹم بھی ہم ڈیولپ کرنے جا رہے ہیں. So thank you very much ji. I'll be available for any question, queries and comments if any in the question and answer session. Thank you very much for your patience listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much Zulfikar Saab for the detailed presentations. ایک بات تو سمجھ آتی ہے کہ اگر ول ہو تو کچھ کام ہو سکتے ہیں, اینڈ ہم نے کچھ کیے بھی ہیں together with BOI and other departments. Now we will have the other side of the story through a panel discussion on this same theme. So for the panel discussions, I would like to invite the panelists on stage. First, Ms. Rahat Kaunain Hassan. She is the Chairperson, Competition Commission of Pakistan. Ma'am, please come on the stage. Ms. Aisha Humaira Moriani. She is the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Information Technology and Telecommunication. Ma'am, please. Mr. Mubashir Sadozai. He is the Executive Director, Security Exchange Commission of Pakistan. Saud Bangar Saab, Resident Director, Pakistan Business Council. Mr. Aftab Haider, Chief Executive Officer, Pakistan Single Window. And lastly, Mr. Muhammad Suleiman Chawla, Senior Vice President, Federation of Pakistan Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He'll be joining us online. Now I'll invite Dr. Nadeemul Haq, Vice Chancellor PIDE, to moderate this session. And over to you, sir. Thank you.
We've heard a lot about regulation recently, and BOI has presented their initiative. And I'm glad to see that some initiative being taken. But I don't know, sir, how long it'll take to do all this, because you got a huge agenda. We need to deregulate now if we want investment. If it doesn't happen, I don't know. We've had BOI for 40 years. Investment rate has been like this. So I think, quite frankly, BOI now needs to take responsibility and tell us when the investment will go like this. Otherwise, we can't survive. This country is not going to survive. So with that, I'd like to turn to my panel and ask, how can we get the investment to go up? Rahat Bibi, can you please start?
Big question mark, but investment is generally, you attract investment where your policies actually act as a catalyst to attract it. So whether we have the right policies or not, to begin with, it's not something in isolation. Heading Competition Commission for the last, since 2020 and earlier also having served there, they say that where there is competition authority which is strong, it attracts investment. There are so many things to address. I mean, I'll like to just focus and restrict myself to the mandate of this commission and the challenges that it has been facing. Because if you talk about evaluating the performance of any regulatory body, you must understand the challenges that it is confronted with. They cannot be an evaluation in isolation. So with your permission, I'd like to comment on the evaluation done on CCP. I mean, maybe it's a good voluntary initiative on your part. The first thing is, whether it's PIDE's mandate or not, I don't want to debate that. But the point is, there has been no interaction with Competition Commission. So if you're relying on a primary data and you're not taking data from the regulatory body itself, how can you evaluate? So we have had international peer reviews conducted. We volunteered ourselves to international third-party evaluations, and we sailed fairly well. Pakistan was viewed and termed as a success story. Now at the national level, it sounds very different. Why? Economy somehow is not on the priority list. I'm sorry, this is how I feel. Our biggest challenge has not been enforcement. You'd be surprised that being one of the youngest agencies, we've had real major successes, but it seemed like nothing was being registered. There was a transition of law. The law came in the form of an ordinance. Then it transitioned into an act. That took us 3 years. So how would an institution perform and discharge the mandate? You see, one aspect is enforcement, the other aspect is judicial review. We have now currently over 500 cases in the courts. So please, as per policy, there has to be some prioritization on economic issues. That's the first thing. We don't see that prioritization. And if I may be allowed to say so, I don't see that prioritization with utmost respect before the courts. 77 billion penalties that have been imposed. I think it's a very small amount, if you ask me. The damage is that for over a decade, the cartels that have been unveiled, they continue. That is why we have a reeling economy. Be it sugar, be it cement, be it fertilizer, you look at the industries that we have where we have unveiled anti-competitive practices. Why is it not making a mark? Because the visibility of the enforcement the impact would only be visible once the judicial review is complete. It's over a decade. It took us over 10 years to decide this issue, whether competition law should be a federal subject or a provincial subject. When in 125 countries, competition law is a federal subject. So our biggest challenge has been, apart from, financial autonomy aspect, in the reports, there are a lot of, since it's a very candid session, please don't mind it. It's not that I have to do any bashing here. I just do wish to put the perspective correctly in terms of, we cannot say that in the reward payment scheme, commission can order 5 billion. I don't have a budget of that much. If somebody would come that we have as informant that you have to pay 5 billion, it's not, it's just 2 million. 200 million was the budget we had for almost 6 years. So we had to struggle for our financial autonomy. We've only got it recently in 2020, whereas the law provided for it. So when you say you attract investment, your priority has to be institutions. You strengthen them. And that should come when institutions, along with the relevant departments and ministries and the Attorney General Office, we all work in coordination. The harmony is very different and the results are very different. The second challenge has been the informal economy. So we're doing a lot in documenting the economy. A lot of people say, oh, you've just been turning the papers black, what good it is, but you write such reports and eventually we're not getting any results. As a nation, I think somehow we have no patience. We want results in very short-term thing. There is no short-term solution to attract investments. First thing first. You will have to be prepared to what you implement. You understand the issues. You have the right policies in place and only results will show. Institution building is not an overnight thing. You strengthen institutions, you engage the right people. I must say that I have over 25 years of experience and over 10 years or now 12 years in public sector. I'm a lawyer by profession otherwise. I think public sector reform is a must. It has to be performance driven. What has happened is that we have in these regulatory bodies which run into hundreds, we have created parking lots for people. If you want energetic, if you want people to be inducted who have merit, you must keep that system open and vibrant and robust. Things don't exist that way. So public sector reforms requires that all public sector organizations are made performance driven. Third, if I may say, which I should have mentioned earlier as well, is ensuring a level playing field for all is only possible if you are equally circumstanced. The problem is those who are paying taxes, they complain that these people are not in a level playing field because they're not paying taxes. Aapka tax equity, the GDP ratio is perhaps one of the lowest because our tax policies perhaps also need a revisit. We have been focusing, maybe we have been focusing more on the revenue rather than broadening the base. I think taxation primarily is to generate economic activity. Taxation, if that is not doing it, there's something wrong somewhere. We need to revisit it. That has become a barrier for many. We have recently done SME report and we would be sharing it with PIDE as well. We actually almost finalized it. There are two things primarily that are confronted by these small businesses. First of all, we are not in sync with that we have not distinguished micro, medium, and small. We only talk about small and medium. So when we conducted a survey, we saw that the target that was allocated, in any case that was very low, was not exhausted by SMEs. And the one that was exhausted was only by the medium ones. So micro ones are nowhere. And between the small and medium, the medium enterprises have the stake, and what they have taken is, I think, the borrowing, the total borrowing cost, it's hardly even not more than 5 or 6%. We'll have to begin from somewhere. Pakistan has a lot to offer. There's no doubt about it, but this would require a lot of deliberation and preparedness before we'll get the results. I'll pass it on.
Very good points, Chief. Very good points, Rahat Bibi. You're absolutely right. We have to really sit down and debate. And that's what we are trying to do at PIDE. And this is our mandate, that we must try and focus on economic policy and try and make it happen and review all that's happening in the country. Because quite frankly, I think we are the most under-researched country in the world. And as I know Gonzalo is sick of hearing that we've outsourced all our research to the World Bank and to IFC, etc. And The rest of us, I keep telling our leaders, please close down universities because you don't need them. But they don't. And as I noticed in the BOI presentation too, they're having consultations with the businessmen, but not with the universities, which is also very interesting because nowhere else in the world does it happen that universities are not in the loop and businesses are in the loop. So let's ask Chawla Saab. Chawla Saab is in Karachi. He's going to talk to us from there. Chawla Saab, why is it that Federation of Chambers has failed us? The investment GDP ratio is not going up, which means businesses are not investing. And the charge that is made on you guys, and I'll be very frank, Rahat has started off very frankly, and I appreciate that. I want everybody to be frank. The charge that is made on you by all of us in the country is that you want subsidies, so it doesn't matter whether whether we deregulate or not. So what's your take on investment and deregulation? Chawla Saab. Okay. So will he come back? No, he won't. Okay, fair enough. So let me take that question to the PBC.
Did you actually say PVC has failed anyone? Or maybe that needs a bit of a reword of the question. Well, PBC is a business advocacy body, and we do research and we try to push the bar for the industry. So we're not really in a position to be kind of pushing policy, but we do advocate and advise. But I want to come to your main thrust about why hasn't there been enough investment. And the way we look at it is obviously we have to look at the picture in all its hues and colors. And if we look back at where we were and where we are, there is a story to it. And the story is that Pakistan, our economy, our political economy, over the years has been very inward looking. PVC always advocates and says that we've deindustrialized prematurely. Pakistan has not been able to go up the curve as a comparator country would have and has. Countries like Vietnam and others have moved on to higher value chains, and they've been able to move on to other products which they are now exporting to the world, and they're earning a revenue from it. We didn't go that path. We developed a particular kind of industry which was more inward looking, which was serving the 150 million to 200 million to 220 million, and now I don't know how many. We'll see what the census says. But it's been very domestic focused. Most of the investments that have come into Pakistan to date have been domestic focused. So now what that meant was, it was not that those investments, when they came in, and I speak particularly of the FDIs and local, they weren't making good money. Yes, they were. But what happened? They were passing the cost of overregulation to the consumer, to the point that those regulators and the regulatory bodies kept on growing and growing and expanding and multiplying, and put in all the words. And now we have so many that we can't handle them. And now we're in a perfect fix. So what do we do? We've come to the end of the road. I would completely endorse what you said. There has to be a revamp, a rethink, and it has to be fast. One of the things we haven't done is that we have not been export focused. If we had been an export focused economy, we would have had to compete with the world, which also would have meant we would have had to comply with international standards. Our prices would have had to meet international benchmarks to be able to compete in those markets. We would have had to try harder to get market access to different regions of the world, which we have not. We are very focused on the UK, particularly, to the EU and the US. Those are the three markets where we export, and we only export a few handful of products. So that has been our story. And that is the reason why we are, in my opinion, where we are. And what we're left with is a bloated government, which we have to pay through our noses, if you wouldn't mind me saying that. And we've just spent ourselves dry. Now, what do we need to get investment? Well, we need to get investment which has to push the export bar up. We have to be very clear about it. Our investment policy has to be very differentiated in that way. It can't be come in, come all, whoever wants to come. And we have to, obviously, as far as the regulatory environment is concerned, I was listening to something that a conversation that was happening on the Europe platform the other day, and they were talking about what's the key to success for Europe today. What are they looking to do? Well, they're looking to establish a common market, not just for labor, not just for capital, not just for transactions, but also digitization. They want a common digitized market. We need a common digitized market. Long gone are the days when work has to be done manually, where we need, a few number of people to do a job. I think regulators have to go invisible to the best extent possible and let the market function. Drawing from, how the US manages the economy, they always talk about lean government. And what they mean about lean government is that you don't see the government. The government only, the market actor, hears from the government in the mail or has a one-off visit for some particular purpose. Otherwise, you don't see a regulator unless it's a very, very necessary task. So when we talk about the Pakistan Business Portal, PBC has been a strong supporter of this initiative. We feel this is the way forward. Like we have a NADRA for basic services to the citizens, like we have the Pakistan single window now for trade-related work and company registrations, we need a Pakistan Business Portal for dealing with all the licenses and all the NOCs and all of those, so that someone who wants to go work can come in and register at a single point and doesn't have to deal with anyone other than that. I'm going to stop there and I'll pass on the floor back to you. Thank you.
Before I go forward, let me ask, sir, ye bataiye, please, why do we need NOCs? I've never heard of NOCs in the West. Maybe Gonzalo, you can tell us, do we need NOCs? Why do we need NOCs? I just don't understand. Why do we need NOCs? Why can't we do away with NOCs?
We are doing away with the NOC with the zero time to start the policy for the SMEs. Because
why SMEs? The rest of us don't count. We don't live.
It's a risk based होगा ना. अगर कोई ऐसा काम करेंगे जिसमें risk ज़्यादा होगा तो उसके लिए NOC चाहिए होगा.
क्या risk है? Is supposing I want to open a shop, right? Let's say a pharmacy. We've done an analysis on this. What's the risk?
इसलिए वो SME के अंदर आ रही है, शॉप जो आ रही है. लेकिन अगर आपने एक बड़ी बिल्डिंग बनानी है,
what's the risk अगर बड़ी बिल्डिंग बनानी है?
उसमें ज़लज़ला आता है कल
ज़लज़ला आता है, so what? Human life. Gonzalo, what is the cost of life in this country?
Environment के भी issues हैं और बहुत सारे issues हैं.
Cost of life in the US has been calculated. It is used in laws. It is used everywhere. Right? Cost of life is used as a legal instrument in the US. If you take out the cost of life here, and if I look at the number of accidents that happen every day and people lose their lives, a building falling down, big deal. And secondly, why do we need an NOC? Why can't we just allow an insurance company to take over and say, "Ki insurance ho gaya certificate," and that's it. You go to a building anywhere in the West, you see an insurance certificate, even in Dubai, in the elevator. And that's good enough. The insurance company regulates the thing. Why do we need 10 NOCs from 10 different agencies for 4 years?
So we are trying to cut down the time period. We are trying to give one platform for all the information and all the NOCs at one place.
Okay, great. Thank you. Overseas Chambers, ji, please bataiye. Your people, most of them have left the country. You still have some people left or not? And why are they leaving the country?
It is about the stability of the policies that are enforced. There is just so much wavering into all of these the policy frameworks that it kind of impedes the confidence. Number one. Number two, it's also about certain challenges. We talk about FX challenge right now. Now, I mean to say, we can't repatriate, the overseas companies cannot repatriate any money. We can't import basic essential raw materials. We can't import basic essential services that we have contracted from overseas, consultants from, and these are all technical, expertise that are not found in country. So I mean to say, Dr. Saab, it's not just, to be honest, in the whole value chain, NOC is a very small component. There are people like myself working in government relations. that can get those things done. But I mean to say there are bigger issues. There are bigger issues than these permits and NOCs.
So what are the bigger issues?
The ones that I just mentioned.
Which is big.
So leave alone whether policy stability is there. We are kind of so slack, even in terms
So
of.
we can't, basically what you're saying is we can neither make policy nor implement it nor monitor.
We can make policies, we can make drafts. We are very good with that.
Oh, sorry.
Dr. Saab.
Sorry, we don't make drafts. Consultants make drafts. We never make drafts. Ye bhi yaad rakhein.
Yeah, fair enough. But then we don't implement it. Sorry.
If I may add, I'd absolutely agree. NOC portion would be a very minor portion of that. Because if you see people are leaving, and since we are having a very candid vote, whether we have rule of law or not is to be determined by its predictability. Whether in a certain situation, the outcome would be the same. Since it doesn't happen that way, neither with the policy, nor with the consistency of the law established or the decisions taken, we are confronted with a lot of issues. I just wanted, where are we heading? I mean, I don't think it's an issue of NOC, it's a question of the process of grant of SC and how efficiently you can give it. It's just one aspect. I think we are lost in the regulation jargon a lot. I have seen over the years, starting with Board of Corporate Governance when I joined SCCP, we've been expanding this so much that we have forgotten what was the whole objective. I'll just give one example. When you talk about governance and this Code of Corporate Governance, we've been taking a lot of pride in. 3 things were only needed: the recognition for fiduciary duty, transparency, and disclosure of interest. But if you look at the checklist, it's so long and tedious that when you invite any director to come on the board, be it with a public company or a private company, they would be harassed. They will feel harassed to take it because it has become so convoluted and difficult. It's not SCCP, I'm just saying generally regulations have become that way. We need to simplify. We need to simplify and have a clearer focus.
It is very easy to introduce a new NOC requirement here, remove it there, and you can do that so easily and so that you can do that constantly. And if you do that constantly, then you don't have policy instability. If you didn't have so much discretionality, being NOCs or being SROs or being the input-output coefficient organization of Karachi saying how much wastage ratios are and moving them constantly, then if you don't have that, then you don't have policy instability. So I think the NOC is a symbol, right? It's much bigger than that, but it's a symbol of the underlying problem that is policy instability. I just wanted to mention that, but if I can add one thing, and it refers to what the gentleman from PVC said, and I think it's all related, on investment, we want export-oriented investment. So we want investment policies that allow export-oriented investment. Okay, but shouldn't the investment policy give national treatment to investments, to foreign investors, and other instruments of policy incentivize firms to invest in export-oriented investments, rather than saying foreign investment can only come if it's export-oriented? Because that's another restriction, that is another distortion in a regulation that in principle should provide national treatment. So is that the investment policy that needs to guide that behavior of being export-oriented, or the investment policy should ensure that whatever is not banned is allowed, and you provide the guarantees to property rights?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And of course, I was speaking more in terms of context, which was that the way we've typically had it in Pakistan is that we've given incentives to investments, even foreign investments across the board. Whilst there shouldn't be any differentiation in terms of investment, whichever investment wants to come is more than welcome. However, it is if and when a country thinks that a particular investment they seek much more than another investment, the country does move forward and make an extra effort to bring it in. In those circumstances, I think Pakistan should also consider being focused on areas which will help enhance its exports. Other than that, I also want to say that one thing that has not gone in very well for us as a country in our economy is the fact that our macroeconomic framework hasn't been consistent. So we've seen our exchange rate valued sometimes higher and sometimes lower. And we haven't really given the market an environment, an umbrella in which it can predict the future. For periods of time, our exchange rate has been overvalued. And what that has done is it has depleted our industrial base. It has even depleted our ability to make things which we can export, which also is one of the reasons why we can't foot our bills at the moment. And the government expenditures have become too burdensome for us. So,
let me go to Aisha. Aisha Bibi, please बताइए. And ये जो भी charge लगाया गया BOI की तरफ से, मैंने नहीं लगाया. BOI ने कहा we are not digital ready. और पूरी हमारी हुकूमत is not digital ready. और हमारी PIDE की तरफ से हमारी research show करती है कि internet तो इस मुल्क में ना होने के बराबर in many places. मतलब internet is only available to the rich. And quite frankly, we just had some research show us today that the largest variable that makes education success is access to internet. Yet when I go to on GT Road, for example, there are 3 or 4 places where there's no internet available. When I go to small cities, there's no internet available. So what is the internet situation and the digital readiness of the government?
I would just like to highlight the fact which was mentioned by one of the previous speaker on policy coherence. So the journey of telecom sector, if we look at it, I think it's a very good example that how policy can make a difference. For example, in the early 2000s, government of Pakistan made a binding commitment in the WTO by liberalizing the telecom sector. So that one correct policy decision of deregulation brought a lot of investment in Pakistan. So 5-6 foreign investors came in Pakistan to invest in the telecom sector. So whatever we have right now would not have happened if that right policy decision was not taken. And then as a continuation of that, we have been coming up with several different policies to strengthen that. But the issues that you have just raised are actually linked with the current economic situation also. PTA has to lower down some of the standards set for the telecom sector just because telecom sector is saying that we cannot import the equipment which is required to increase our network or to ensure the standards and quality, which they are bound to do. And if they don't do it, PTA imposes penalties on them because they also keep on doing their surveys in different areas that where the network is working or if the quality is not good. So the situation because of the dollar crisis and the foreign currency not available enough in the country, State Bank had to take certain measures on import restrictions. So telecom sector is currently facing a lot of difficulties because of those import restrictions. This is a major reason. But at the same time, I think it's also important to recognize that average monthly data usage per customer has increased from 2 GB to over 7 GB in Pakistan. It's per month. And investment of 6 billion has come in this sector, and telecom sector contributes to the national exchequer 1.1 trillion. Telecom sector contribution just to USF and Ignite, which is 2% of the revenue of the telecom companies, and USF is to serve the served areas where the telecom sector will not go because they may not find it very profitable. So there is 1.5% revenue contribution by the telecom sector to the USF, and then 0.5% contribution to the R&D fund, which is run by Ignite. So this 2% is being used completely, and it is 45 billion rupees, which is spent on increasing connectivity and ensuring that towers are placed in areas where telecom sector may not find it very feasible to put the towers. And secondly, a lot of enabling environment and ecosystem is being created by right set of policies, such as cloud policy was approved, cybersecurity policy was approved, and then Cybersecurity Act will soon come to the Parliament. Data protection bill will be coming, is going to the cabinet for approval, and once that process is done, it will also be going to the Parliament. So there are a lot of important blocks which have to be there to ensure that knowledge economy becomes vibrant. And I think it's very important for our regulators to understand that this shift that we have to make towards the knowledge economy needs different types of regulations. And those regulations, again, have to be seamless. But I think on this side, government has not really started working. Even on the trade that my colleague from the private sector mentioned, that we should have been export oriented. WTO on 4th April has come up with their trade report for 2023. They are saying the growth will be 1.7%, not more than that. And these are the goods. The growth is happening in services, and 45% of the services is digital trade. So that is an area where we really have to invest now, and we have to develop our expertise. Even the regulatory agencies have to learn that how other countries are doing digital trade. Maybe right now we are importers, but there is a lot of scope. And many regulators are sitting here. I would like to invite their attention that some of our regulators are also one of the major players in the market. So these are the problems which affect private sector development. So I think we need, definitely we need to address the regulations, and ease of doing business needs to be addressed. And to promote further investment in the IT sector, dispute resolution mechanisms need to be strengthened. And data-based planning and decision-making is required. Another very important project that Ministry of IT is currently working at, ECNIC has recently approved it, is about digitalization. Data exchange layers will be developed under that project, and we will be working with NADRA very closely so that data is accessible. The protocols will be developed that how that the data which is available can be used. And by using that data properly, we can increase a lot of employment opportunities. We can do better decision making. So we have started moving in that direction, but we still need to take a lot of good steps to ensure that we keep moving in that direction. For the telecom sector, we are also working on a telecom infrastructure sharing policy, and then spectrum refarming policy. So these are all the building blocks that Ministry of IT is trying to ensure that we follow policy coherence and minimize regulatory hiccups, and make it facilitating and encourage private sector development.
Three-letter word, or three letters that we use very regularly in South Asia. And when I was in Sri Lanka, I used to say that's a four-letter word, a dirty word, which is ING. We are moving, we are doing. Question is, the country is dying. That's also a three-letter word. Investment is not picking up. Why is investment not picking up? Dekhiye ji, please mujhe bataiye. When I talk to the telecom operators, they're not happy with your regulation at all. In fact, Nortel has just moved out, Telenor has just moved out, because they say, hey, they're not happy with this regulation because, quite frankly, they are starved for spectrum. You're not giving enough spectrum. Secondly, you're overcharging for spectrum. The spectrum auction mechanism sucks. In fact, the first spectrum auction designer, Wilson, has written against it, but we are still using an ancient spectrum auction mechanism. Then this whole business about tower sharing, etc., should have happened 20 years ago, but it's happening now, so it's too late. We have to think about what's happening, where the industry is moving. And they tell me that we are not moving with the industry. The 2% that you're collecting for the telecom fund, that 2%, where is it going? Ignite has set up incubation centers that really are not doing much. If you talk to the freelancing industry, they're kind of, also struggling because the payment mechanisms are not there, the spectrum is not there, and they are just sitting there. If you talk to the few startups that have happened here, they're also worried. So what is the Ministry of IT doing about all this? I know there's a lot of legal process underway, but do we need that much legal process, or do we need much more deregulation?
I think the major step we took for the telecom sector, we are now having the fruits, but as you have rightly said, that certain things should have been done much earlier so that speed could have been increased. But I would just like to highlight that the R&D fund, which is executed through Ignite, is running 8 national incubation centers across Pakistan. And those are all managed and run by the private sector. And a lot of startups have benefited. For example, Baikia is a product of one of the NICs of Ignite. Similarly, DevTalk, which was involved in doing all the translations in the World Economic Forum, is an startup of an Ignite NIC. So there are a lot of very good examples of international startups who have really gained stature, got their mentorship from the R&D fund, which was contributed by the telecom sector. And 37%, I got a survey done that all the cohorts which have been coming in these 8 NICs, I wanted to know that how many of them were women. So 37% of the beneficiaries of all these NICs are women-owned startups, which I think is a big revolution, because women are coming in this area and they have an equal opportunity to get exposure, learning, and they get an opportunity to pitch their ideas. One of the startup developed a solution for green emission, which she went to US and pitched to Boeing. So these are the kind of opportunities which are being provided by this R&D fund. And similarly, towers are being put in very, very remote areas, in all the tehsils and villages. And a lot of these are in KP, Balochistan, south of Punjab, and rural areas of Sindh. So some of the work is now stuck right now because there are import restrictions. So we can't, I mean, for the last 2 years, and especially last year, several projects of USF were stuck because those who were selected through a bidding process for the execution could not import the equipment. Again, the process for putting up the towers is not done by any government organization. It's again done through a bidding process by the telcos, by the private companies. So we work very closely with the private sector. No policy is ever approved or goes to the cabinet unless it is stamped by the private sector. So we work very closely with them. And in fact, we took up their cases to the State Bank, and a lot of facilitation was offered by the State Bank to the telecom sector specifically because of the intervention of Ministry of IT. And Prime Minister is very keen that this sector, grows and is facilitated. He has formulated an advisory council. He regularly takes meetings of those advisory councils, and he has specifically given direction to facilitate the IT sector. So government is very keen to facilitate this sector because they can see that there is a growth opportunity. But at the same time, I think it's very important that the regulators also understand it. We are having so much problem with the FBR because ease of doing business is something which we have been trying to, talk to them and trying one window solution for all the IT companies. I know Telenor is not leaving for, by the way, Telenor is still here, but I know one company who brought their businesses here, and they really got stuck because of some of the definitions of FPR. And it's a very big IT company which is doing wonders in other countries of the world. But so they decided to, you know, shift some of their processes to other countries. So it's very important that all the regulators understand that if we really want different sectors to grow, and especially if we want digital economy to grow, we have to have very facilitative regulations.
Thank you, Ji. Any regulators here on the floor, please? You're free to participate. Come up, we'll put separate chairs for you. We have so much room for you to speak because we want you to speak. Tell us how you justify your regulation, because I don't see regulation justified at all. And we'll come back to BI on that. Please tell us how this regulation is justified. Let's put ourselves on the map and let's try and be, instead of mapping regulation, let's map ourselves and see, can we deregulate and join the world? The rest of the world has all kinds of treaties too. They've deregulated. Look at Dubai. Dubai, it's not as if they don't participate in regulatory treaties around the world, but look at how business functions there. Even Hafiz Sheikh, his former finance minister, his son-in-law went to Dubai. In one day, he had a big business going. He didn't have to get 20,000 NOCs. He didn't have to get this, that, etc. They were project ready and they were ready to go. But let's quickly bring in the SCCP, because the SCCP also, SCCP, sir, ye apna kya kehte hain, Sadozai साहब, इन्होंने तो आपको छोड़ दिया, ये तो SMEs की तरफ जा रहे हैं, ठीक है ना? So you are totally unregulated and free. Yet, जो SCCP की अगर हम बात करें, तो as a consumer, I've just lost money on SCCP, so I can say that. ठीक है? कि as a consumer, this market is shrinking. This is the incredible shrinking market in the world. And new listings are not coming out. People are actually delisting from the stock exchange. Companies are not growing. The largest company on the SEC, TSX is, I think, Engro, right? Engro is the largest company, sir? Engro is the largest company, no? Apart from the multinationals and all those, okay. A local company. I mean, it's a very strange stock market that the largest company is government owned 10% and the private sector companies are so small, they are way below that. And Engro is, I think, worth about $1 billion, which is like pocket change in the world. Bit over that, okay. But it's pocket change in the world. I mean, Adani lost $100 billion and didn't even worry about it, right? So let's put things in perspective. So, Janab, Sir Sadozai Sahab, is the SCCP over-regulating?
No, sir. The answer is simply no. SCCP basically believes in simplification of laws and regulations. SCCP is the first organization who excelled in the ease of doing business in the World Bank report. And in starting a business, due to SCCP, we have, I think, jumped 58 points. First time in the history of Pakistan. So SCCP is also the first organization, I think, which in Companies Act, we have introduced the definition of startups. We have SMEs. SCCP is registering on daily basis 100 and 150 local companies. So companies are increasing day by day. So we have more than 200,000 companies in SCCP at our register. Foreign companies are coming. For investment are coming. Every month we publish our data in daily newspapers. So, zyada nahi hai, but for investment are coming. Local companies are too much registering their businesses. LLPs, lawyers, consultants, local businesses, they are growing in SCCP in Pakistan.
And PSX?
PSX is a different thing. I think it depends, like Madam Rahat said.
Should we write off the PSX now? Should we say it's, it's over?
No, it's there, but there are so many other components and things which depends on the investment side, like law and order and other matters, laws. So these are different matters.
So basically, SCCP is not at fault. Everybody says it's not my fault, somebody else's fault. Yet, our companies are growing. Yet, PS6 is falling. Nobody wants to list there. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I'm not obviously I'm being a little dramatic. The question is, when are we going to face up the facts? क्यों जी? Single window आपने बना दिया sir. ये single window हमें क्यों चाहिए? Why do we need a single window? The whole world doesn't have a single window. This itself shows that there is a problem that we need a single window. So what you do is you regulate here and you build a single window, then you build another single window.
So thank you very much. I think it's a very interesting question. And in fact, this entire discussion is very interesting. A lot of the content, a lot of thoughts being expressed are actually music to my ears. Since PSW is the Pakistan single window, PSW is the new kid on the block. A lot of people don't know us, but we basically are a state-owned entity, public, registered with SECP under Section 42. We are very corporate in the way we work. The basic mandate that we have is a digitalization of cross-border trade. So we are creating a single platform, an electronic platform to connect 77 government trade regulators that range from FBR and customs all the way to PTA and Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Food Security, and there are so many departments under them. We are bringing them 77 government departments. 77. This is a good question, and this is a question that we ask every day when we meet the government agencies. So why do we need a single window? I think it's a very provocative question. Why don't we need a single window if there's so much regulation in place and the cross-border trade is so complex? We are talking about a sector which is connected to international trade, has a lot of international dimensions. So why wouldn't you like to facilitate trade, to bring down the cost of doing business, to try and contribute to export, improve export competitiveness of Pakistan, and encourage small and medium enterprises to get into that international supply chain without going through the regulatory process that is in place? We are not a trade regulator. So I'm on this table because I think I bring a very unique perspective from a public sector agency that is working from a private sector perspective. Most of the work that we do is from a private sector perspective. For your kind information, the single window is an international commitment. About 77 governments around the world have created single window, including UAE. But single window Pakistan is actually very unique in the sense that once completed, it would be probably in the 10 or 15 top single windows in the world that will just not connect customs and trade regulators, but will also have a port community system at all the seaports in Karachi, an airport community system at all the airfreight units, and also a land port community system, which means that every economic operator associated with cross-border trade is being connected to that platform. They're talking to each other. The payments are digital. The regulatory processes are all digital. I can go on and on the single window. I will not go, but we are probably one of those unique organizations in Pakistan that have gone out of the ING curse. We are not doing, we have done it. Most of what I say is not aspirational in nature. It is what we are actually planning and implementing right now. When we went out and we looked at all the processes that these government departments are doing, we found out a lot of interesting stuff. And I think the presentations in the morning covered so many of the things that we had also found out in our assessment reports. We started in 2017. In 2022, we rolled out the first phase of single window. So it's one of those unique public sector programs that got implemented in time. But what we did find out, we found out that government regulators are working in silos. They're working in isolation. The funniest part was I went to an organization, I'm not going to name it, and there were two clerks sitting opposite each other asking for the same set of information. So a trader would go with about 1,800 pieces of paper, would give it to one clerk and also give it to the other one. And both of the clerks will just not share that information with each other. There are funnier instances where a government agency is asking for a license which they themselves have issued. So, for example, you used to go to customs for registration in the VBOX system. You used to present 22 documents. Half of those documents added no value to the verification process. There were letters from chambers. There were your rent agreements. There were NTN certificates issued by FBR, for example. There is one other government agency which is very active in reform. I'm not going to name it as well, but one of its processes includes 200 papers, 28 sets of documents just to get exemption if you're an investor trying to bring something in the country. So you see there are silos, not within the government, but within departments themselves. So that is the first thing. The other thing is information asymmetry. The traders don't have access to all the information. So they don't really know who to contact. How long is the process going to take? What are the fee that they should be paying? What is not the amount of money that they should be paying, for example? So that is there. And then, of course, you also have problems about people working in those government organizations who are extremely good regulators, but know very less about the core business that they're supposed to regulate. So what are we doing? When we go into any organization, we put on two hats. One hat is that of the government regulator. We just can't tell them that NOC khatam. No way, because there are certain reasons why they want an NOC. There are certain aspects they want to regulate. Forms are all control measures. जब आपसे कोई form मांगता है, उसमें information मांगता है, तो basically वो ये चाह रहे हैं कि अपनी risk assessment करें. Since everyone used to work in the manual environment, they used to ask for forms. When we go there in the government agencies, we put ourselves in their perspective. We look at the regulations and we say, okay, so this is your risk. And this is the way we can mitigate those risks through use of digitization. And so we talk about data exchange between different companies. We are integrating with SECP. So for example, if you're a company and you want to transact business with Department of Plant Protection, you don't need to give your memorandum of association, articles of association. All that information would just pass on digitally from through our platform on a single click of button. So that is one thing. The other thing is that we started removing information asymmetry. So we have talked about portals. The BOI is trying to come up with the Pakistan Business Portal. Single Window has created Trade Information Portal of Pakistan, single access point for all information related to import, export, and transit. I would encourage everyone to take a look at it and see the wealth of information that is there. Thank you for the World Bank colleagues actually for supporting that initiative that was built by us. So we are removing the information asymmetry. And the third thing is that we are re-engineering the processes. So we are eliminating redundant processes, redundant documents. We are cutting down the approval levels, and we are making sure that the times are monitored and they are given to the right decision makers to tell them about the inefficiencies in the system. So, sir, I mean, that has been our small contribution towards the cross-border trade sector of Pakistan. And I think that everything is not bleak. I mean, it's very easy to just write off the government sector's part and saying that they are being an impediment to investments and trade and all that. But I think it is also important to look at it from their perspective. One last point that I'm going to make here is that in many government agencies that we go, there is an appetite for reform. They just are not enabled for reform. So when we talk to them and we give them the ideas of how they can better manage their own business, and we provide them the tools for doing it, they're almost always forthcoming. That is why, alhamdulillah, we have had a lot of success. So that's all about us. I'm happy to share further experiences, sir.
Thank you very much. Ji, dekhiye, ye kehna bada aasan, everything is not bleak, but where I stand, everything is very bleak. We're about to default. How worse can it get? Investment GDP ratio doesn't exist. How bad can it get? I don't see how you can say everything is not bleak. I think everything is very bleak, and it's time we woke up as a nation and realized it's very bleak. Madam, aap upar aa jana, you are the Additional Secretary Investment, please upar aaiye. Mujhe ye baat bataiye, aap madam aake bataiye कि ये emergency nahi hai to kya hai? If it's not a national emergency and if everything is not bleak, am I being over pessimistic? Please tell me, please contradict me. I'm looking for hope. कि BOI क्या कर रहा है? BOI हमें कुछ करके देगा या ये लंबी presentations होंगी? When are we going to get investment up? I think your mandate is to get investment up, and I want to push you towards that.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. And first of all, I must congratulate you for arranging this symposium. And I'm so happy with the turnout. It's remarkable. It's fantastic. Ji Nadeem Saab, I tend to agree with you. Yes, right now things are looking quite dark. They are dark, and they have been dark for a while. And everything I've been listening very intently to all the comments and all the views. And we know all that has been said. The issues with taxation, the over-regulation, working in silos, all these issues are very real. Ab karna kya hai? So we can keep on having such workshops. and lamenting all the wrongs that exist within our systems. इसी तरह की workshops करते रहें और यही regurgitate करते रहें. Nothing is going to come out of it. So I'm here as a representative of the government and specifically of the Board of Investment. So we have been thinking about all these issues for about 4 months now. It's been about 6 months since I joined the BOI. Before that, I was working in the Federal Board of Revenue. I belong to the Inland Revenue Service and I was working there as member reforms. अब reforms में जो मेरा तजर्बा है, what I have seen over the past 4 years, 4 to 5 years, हमारा मसला जो है ना सबसे बड़ा, we don't have that mindset at the national level. जिस तरह नदीम साहब ने कहा कि it's a national issue. Problem ये है कि आप silos में बैठ के, because everything, especially in the modern world, everything is so interconnected and so linked. There is absolutely no way, let's talk of investment. There is no way that you're going to attract investment just by BOI, doling out an investment policy कि जी ये हमने 6 चीजें इसमें लिख दी हैं. No, unless and until the Federal Board of Revenue sits there and we explain to them कि जी आपके short term targets की बात नहीं है, state की long, medium term और long term sustainability का सवाल है. So we have to think big. इसलिए बराए मेहरबानी अपनी जो taxation policies हैं उनको आप उस नजरिए से देखें. आपकी investment policy जो है वो incomplete रहे. Same goes for the your trade policy and your petroleum and energy policy. Holistic, whole of government, synergized approach. That is what is needed. And not only that, it's not only about the government. Unke 3 tiers. वो important हैं. It is about us. And most of all, अब हम जो we की बात करते हैं, मैं ये सोच रही थी कि ये we किस बला का नाम है? We will do this, we will do this. क्या करें? I think we have to shift the narrative from we to I. What can I do in my role? क्योंकि मुझे तो यही मैं तो first and foremost I was studying for my public sector public management degree in Australia. तो एक हमारा जो public policy का एक lecture था उसमें accountability की बात हो रही थी और responsibility की बात हो रही थी. And that it's always stayed with me, that responsibility and accountability begin with the individual. So it's about your individual responsibility and your individual accountability. And then, the critical mass starts to build up. So I'm not here to give a lecture, but अब मैं आपको ये बताना चाहती हूँ, it's a kind of a good news in this, जो नदीम साहब कह रहे थे, bleak setup. We have decided to establish an extension of the Board of Investment. Institutions की भी बात हुई है, institution building की, by the name of Invest Pakistan. We're working on that. As I speak, the initial concept note has been sent to the cabinet for approval. Allah करे कि उसकी approval जल्दी हो जाए. And that particular entity, उसके पीछे जो सारा एक rationale है, वो यही है जो सारी बातें यहाँ पे हो रही हैं, that we need a national platform, not a federal, not a provincial platform. We need a national platform. This is about Pakistan, जहाँ पे all the important institutions of the government are represented, where the private sector is represented, where the academia has a voice, the think tanks can contribute, and we can together collaboratively develop and design an investment policy, जिससे आपके पास आप अपने एक जो है ना इस पूरी ये जो investment climate है उसको ठीक भी करें, उसकी regulations को भी address करें और implementation की जो बात हो रही है matlab reports par ke, I am, I always tell my development partners, when they come, this study, that study, I say, I am just absolutely sick and tired of studies. We know the issues. How are we going to address them? And in how, what's the time period? So these are things that we have started to work on. And I would like to invite people to please join this. It's almost like a national cause now. And I hope as soon as we get the approval, we're going to be talking more about it, having more seminars where I would like to have ideas through brainstorming sessions about how and what to do and how soon we can do it. So this is the small ray of hope that I, in my capacity, can present to you. It's in its nascent stage. It's a concept. It's a new concept in some ways, but we've looked at models throughout the world. What's happening in the neighboring country, Aapne mentioned Kia. Yes, we've studied that model. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's already being done and being done very effectively. We just have to catch up. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Thoda sa main ikhtilaf karunga. I don't think that we know all the solutions. If we did, we'd be very happy. Quite frankly, we messed up more than other countries. We messed up more than Nigeria, Ghana, everybody. And I think we should really, really begin to look at ourselves in the mirror and not say, nahi yaar, we have. And we made more agencies, madam, than any other country. We've got so many agencies, got agencies coming out of years. There are all kinds of projects. Every ministry has about 20 attached departments now. And they keep making more and more attached departments. Every ministry has regulations galore, regulatory agencies galore, and every regulatory agency wants to take 0.5% of the transaction, 0.3% of the transaction, and we've got transactions going, costs going up through the roof. GDP is a sum of transactions. You kill transactions, make them more expensive, you kill the economy. So I think there's a national emergency here, and we really do not know enough about the economy. FBR, is anybody here from the FBR? Why can't we have the FBR here? Ji, please, bataiye. Aapke par bahut sakht blame aa raha hai. People are saying that FBR is the biggest problem in the room. Sabse aapse sun liya. So what is FBR doing about simplifying its documentation and simplifying its policy? Because your policy is cumbersome. Secondly, you change your policy every 3 months. Which is kind of mini budget after mini budget, we're going to do a disaster. How is FPR dealing with that? What do you say about that?
तो मेरा ख्याल है कि कुछ इश्यूज तो बड़ी लार्जर इकोनॉमिक लेवल के हैं. Federal Board of Revenue being obviously a policy making institution giving input to the federal government, but then it is largely the parliament which decides in terms of economic impediments. बाकी अगर आप
Yet
I'm sorry. सर शब्बर ज़ैदी साहब को तो मैं डिफेंड नहीं कर सकता यहाँ पे बैठ के. लेकिन अगर आप मुझसे कुछ पूछें कि in order to make things easier what we are doing, so there are many things that are we are happening, because right now there is a whole Directorate General which is looking at digitalization initiatives in the economy. So obviously tax policy के issue तो broader level पे discuss किए जा सकते हैं, उनके लिए मैं नहीं explain कर सकता. लेकिन yeah, I do agree there is a lot of lack of stability in our economic policy making. They should be decided in a more sustained in a long-term perspective manner. But unfortunately, जो government economic realities हैं, वो किसी से छुपी हुई नहीं है. मेरा ख्याल है कि उनको अगर मैं short term में defend करूं, तो that will not be justified.
I'm really surprised at this. That we got senior government officials telling us that somehow something's happening out there and that they have no response to it. And then you tell me that somehow we need to coordinate. Hell, I thought that's what the civil service is for. That's why you have secretaries, which is a very, very centralized structure, right, Ji? You have a very centralized structure. Secretary is the principal accounting officer. He controls everything under him. And there are about 10 secretaries in this country that matter, even less. And they have a secretaries meeting every week, I think, right? And then there's a cabinet of a highly centralized country. And you can't coordinate anything. Then you tell me something went to the cabinet, we are having meetings. As my friend Jerry Rao in India mentioned to me that IT died in India the day made the IT ministry. So the question is, what's happening in the government? Why are you guys not able to coordinate? Why are you guys not able to make a policy to get us out of this mess? Gonzalo, maybe you should comment on this. Or maybe the IFC General, Mr. Schneider, can you comment on this? Please tell us. What's wrong with our governance structure? You both live here. What's wrong with our governance structure that we can't get our act together? We are sitting there, senior government officials are blaming each other. And when we try and call them, they don't want to present themselves to have a discussion. So people from the floor, please take up the discussion, join us, tell us what you want, or maybe you guys all love your unemployment and keep your fast. Thank you.
And so I think, you know, what other countries have done. So I had the opportunity to work in Vietnam, and I think many examples have been made of Vietnam from about 2008 till 2013 or 14. And prior to that, I was in the region in Laos, so I was still covering Vietnam. And you know, I just Googled, I was just having some fun because it seems in this room there's not a lot of agreement about whether there's actually a crisis going on or not. I Googled economic crisis in Pakistan, found a lot of entries, not just from local newspapers, but from global media, CNN, Bloomberg, you know, you name it. So they think something's going on. But it is true. It is true. Is it really happening? Because when I was in Asia in the 1990s, not for IFC, but another capacity. And when the Asian financial crisis hit, you knew it. You felt it. In fact, there was fear, right? I felt it. And partially that hasn't happened here because the ramifications of the ramifications of the currencies and everything else haven't hit yet, right? And banks are not teetering yet. So so that's the question: are we in a crisis or not? But so how Vietnam responded to the financial crisis in Asia was to take action, right? And maybe Pakistan could avoid some of the pain that East Asia felt at that time by doing something now. But they decided to focus on process, right? Reform process. Right, because there's just way too many things being raised in this room today to solve, right, to happen at once. And everybody's got a great initiative going. Some are going fast. I give a lot of credit to the Pakistan single window because I do think this approach is used in many countries to make sure that at border points you can get everything done quickly, and that's starting to happen here. But they focused on two things, right? They focus on FDI. Because Vietnam's a very important country for foreign investment, and they're supplying to the region so much, more than Pakistan, right? Probably has the potential for. And at the other hand, they dealt with SMEs, local businesses. They took a two-track approach to reform. With foreign investment, they focused on what our OACCI colleagues were talking about previously: investor protections, right? Not the daily administrative burdens, but the real thing that big investors are looking at, which is what we heard from the telecom representative who's here. Those are the big issues. And you raised it yourself about bandwidth and getting access, right? Those are the big issues. No regulatory reform agency is going to solve that, right? But they need a platform for discussing these issues and making it much more public. Right? Because a lot of the things I've been hearing today, I never heard before. I live here. I've been coming here for 4 years, regular basis. Yet it's not really national news, at least not that I see. So a more transparent dialogue between the government and the private sector on very key issues of the day would be very helpful, chaired by a prime minister, right? And you could look at other cases of countries who've done these so-called business forums, public-private dialogue. I saw a reference to PPD in a presentation today. That's a PPD on a small administrative topic. That's not a public-private dialogue on a business, huge business-related issue. So, and they also did investor protection through investment laws, right? Through national treatment, as Gonzalo said before, making sure that was in place. Pakistan's finally started to do that on a case-by-case basis with this Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Act of 2022, which is giving one project investor protections that maybe all projects should get, right? This is a special law. I agree that that was a good idea. You need that investment. I also think it was a good thing that that project, the Reko Diq mining project, had to go through all the pain it did, right? Through investor state disputes. But that, look where we are now. We actually have a mining project that's going to start creating revenue for Balochistan, for the federal government, and you know, make money hopefully in a good way. So, but this should be something that's happening for all investors, not just for one project. And I know there's in that law, there's the provision for qualified investment that maybe others could participate in the same way or be qualified in the same way as this project. But maybe we should be looking at a more broad-based investor protection law that doesn't require you to be a huge investor or a strategic investor, but to be an investor, right? Which is what you need. You need lots of investors, not a couple of huge ones. Then Vietnam went the other way.
Are all foreign investors, or do we need domestic investment?
They're investing in the economy.
No, but do we need domestic investment?
Of course. Investment
so what
law,
comes first? Sorry, what comes first? Foreign investment?
I would never prioritize between the two. I
You
would
won't
never say one's more
So did
important than the
Vietnam,
other.
did Vietnam or China invest first, or did it get foreign investment first?
Well, you know, Vietnam in those days was a very much low-income economy.
Even if it's a
lower than here.
How much did it invest?
And they were a state-owned economy, right?
How much did it invest?
I don't have numbers like that, but you know, FDI is a very important part of economies in Southeast Asia. And I think it could be much more important here, both for domestic economy, but also for export orientation. But then the other track was the administrative procedures track, and that's what PRMI is trying to do, right? And, you know, Vietnam is still doing that today, but a long ongoing process of reinventing itself, reinventing procedures, reinventing regulations. And I believe that started in about 2007 and is still going today. There's a special agency in charge. But just to say that there's a lot of resource going into that in Vietnam's case, and they've been, you know, taking it to the highest level and putting a lot of resource into that. And it's important to do that. So to prioritize that work. So I think, you know, there's these two tracks that we could be looking at and thinking more about process. Some of that's happening now with PRMI. Some of that's happening now with this Foreign Investment Protection and Promotion Act, but more can be done to streamline and standardize these things. So, again, and last but not least, sorry, the most important point I wanted to raise was that through the public-private dialogue platforms that Vietnam set up, they make the dialogue very public, very high level, and very professional. And what gets raised to these issues are the issues raised by the private sector, not by the government saying these are the things we need to solve, but it's the other way around. It's the private sector saying this is what's important to us. Prioritize these few things.
Yeah, here the private sector will say, give us more exemptions, give us more SROs, give us.
That is not at all what. That is not at all what.
That's what
happening
happens.
in Vietnam.
That's what happens
well,
here.
I don't think so. I think you know, I represent the private sector.
Mr. Schneider, I have sat in these meetings. I was the deputy chair of the planning commission. I've sat in these meetings with the local and private people. I think, quite frankly, the first thing that we have to do is stop the public-private dialogue. Let's bring in the third party. The consumer is not in the dialogue, and all we have is these big fish sitting there asking for more exemptions, like they get all kinds of subsidies. For God's sakes, we have to get beyond this. We have to stop worshipping the private sector. Is the private sector a saint in this country, madam? No. So the point is,
this is not advocacy platform for benefits, for more benefits. It's an advocacy platform for regulatory reform. And if the if the private sector starts raising issues through a platform like this around, we need more tax incentives, you say, sorry, that's not the point of this dialogue. Talk about something else. You're not the
We are
regulator.
not, by the consumers, we are not in the room. It's only the big guys in the room. And the big guys are getting all their subsidies. Like we get cars, the most expensive cars in the world. We get the most expensive cell phones in the world. We get all these crazy things. We get all these cartels that she's talking about. And you want those guys to have a single, this is what I object to. I think quite frankly, we need to find out how to have a better public-private dialogue, not just the states and the companies. Anyway, let me ask everybody a question. How many people think there's a crisis in this country and the situation is bleak? A lot of people don't actually. That's interesting.
We often hear, we know what the problems are, and I don't think we do. And I'm going to give 3 examples. I keep hearing that exchange rates don't matter for exports. I don't think the data supports that, but I keep hearing it everywhere. I keep hearing that to reduce the current account deficit, they need to increase import duties. I think it's a saving investment imbalance problem. It's a fiscal deficit problem. I keep hearing whenever we talk about export-led growth, everybody agrees with export-led growth, but they also agree with import substitution policies. And they keep bringing import substitution, and the two things are not compatible, the way I see it. So I don't think we have reached an agreement on what actually the problems are and much less on what the solutions are. So I think we need much more detail. And I say we, because I've been here for many years already, right? But you need a much deeper discussion, debate on what the problems and what the feasible solutions are, and not escape disagreement, because there's going to be disagreement, because there are different ideologies and there are different ways of, even this title, right? Regulatory reform is provocative, but you started provocatively, right? Do we want to deregulate? I mean, I don't know. It depends on what regulations we're talking about, right? We don't want to eliminate all regulations. Some regulations make sense. So it makes sense that there are many agencies in the export and import space. It makes sense, perhaps not 77, but it makes sense that there are many. And so it makes sense that there's a PSW. We don't want no regulations, but certainly not all regulations we have make sense. But we need to get into the details to be able to have that discussion, not remain in the surface. So I think that's worth saying.
Yes, there was, the economy has been on a certain track, but it should not go on that track. It should be a different type of an economy going forward. I think let's resolve to that. The other thing, since we're talking regulatory systems, there is an institutional aspect to it and there's a policy aspect to it. As far as policies are concerned, yes, we agree. They've been inconsistent. Debate on whether we have foreign investment, domestic investment. Well, we have to talk about market development. The market has to work for everyone, whether it is a small business trying to grow or it is a foreign business trying to establish itself in this market. But the system has to work for everyone. One of the key elements, Dr. Saab, that came out of a comment that you made was about transaction costs. Now, that is a very critical point you made. Over time, we've seen that there has been this concept that regulators are developed, established on self-finance basis. So that's the easiest thing to do. Oh, you see a regulatory gap? Let's make a new organization. Oh, who's going to fund it? Well, the consumer is going to fund it. They're going to fund themselves. How much are they going to charge? 2%, 0.5% on turnover? Well, that's a turnover tax. That's not a fee. And it just keeps growing. It's shocking to see the numbers, but it seems like the regulators are in a mode to generate more revenue. And that's not the purpose of regulating. They're public sector organizations. First and foremost, they should never be self-financing. The government is being paid taxes to fund their own departments, to fund their own organizations. This may well be one of the most key deformities in the system at the moment. Thank you very much.
And I would add to that is where the rent seeking starts. And that is why if you want any private sector reform, you will have to reform the public sector first. It has to be made performance driven. If you have a minimum wage, you have to have a maximum capping as well in public sector, because public service is a calling. It's not just to pay you heavy salaries and make sure that everything is make sure that you're in a comfortable zone. No, it's not meant to be. The whole dynamic have to be changed. And I think we've been talking all about regulation, but since I view my agency as an enforcer more than a regulator, we have a regulatory role in terms of mergers and grant of exemptions only, but primarily we are an enforcement agency. And what is endemic in Pakistan, be it policy making or enforcement, is conflict of interest that needs to be addressed. When we talk about subsidies and exemptions and all these things, these are all anti-competitive. Any kind of protectionism is anti-competitive. How you deal with it? We keep mentioning to the investment aspect. Primarily, investment comes where you are competitive. The competitive index comprises of then 12 pillars. They're all aligned. She rightly said that you have to have a holistic approach. It's just not one thing that will change it overnight. So I think I do agree, we perhaps do not know the problems. We need to be more prepared, and we need to have a targeted approach. I'll just share one thing. When the FTC chair visited us in Competition Commission, he said in any organization, and I would apply anywhere, perhaps be it a country or an organization, you need to have a direction and need to know your prioritizations. What are your 3-4 priorities? And then you start beginning. You can't start everything at once, but at least we should set our priorities right. Thank you.
जी SCCP से भी जरा ये सवाल पूछना सदुद्दीन साहब, देखिए हमने PIDE में एक रिसर्च की है where we have shown that Dr. Mahbubul Haq in 1969, 68, and that research also came from PIDE, showed that his wife had done it in PIDE. Dr. Mahbubul Haq made it big, that there were 22 families who owned Pakistan Stock Exchange. Today we find, sir, that there are 31 families who own Pakistan Stock Exchange. So you made a lot of progress in 60 years. We've gone, 7 or 8 families up. But we also found another thing, so much for corporate governance. And here again, USA did a big project in corporate governance. We got an Institute of Corporate Governance in Karachi. I'd like you to know that I'm trying to reach that Institute of Corporate Governance because I want them to give a webinar. This is what we do, madam. We try and bring sunlight to these hidden agencies and they don't want to come. What do we do? So Institute of Corporate Governance gives corporate governance training. Let me ask these people, how many of you are on the board of directors here? Can somebody raise their hand if you're on the board of directors? I thought as much. So Sadhuddin Sahib, I've asked Hafiz Pasha, I've asked Akmal Hussain, I've asked Salman Shah, I've asked all the so-called good people in Pakistan. Are they on any companies' boards? They're not. Who's on the company's boards? We checked on that. A few city bankers, a few retired government officials, a few NIT professionals, and most of them, what they have in common? What do they have in common? I exaggerate, but not by much. Most of them are Sindh Club, Punjab Club members. And this is what that woman, Teresa, what's her name? She came to us and she gave a webinar written up Rosita Armitage. She also said this is the problem in this country, that everybody's hand in glove. So how does SCCP solve this problem? Or is our market, there's a very big suspicion that a market is totally controlled by a few people. Is that correct or is that wrong?
Yes, sir, you're right. Let me explain. It was in 2013 when SCCP first time introduced public sector companies rules for public sector, enterprises to have 1/3 of their board as independent director. Who will be the independent director? The independent director will be from the private sector, who are eminent in their professions, different professions. So we have introduced that in listed companies, one director will be female. and 1/3 will be from private sector, independent director, to have independent view on that board and their decisions. So this was the first time introduced in 2013.
13.
Yes. The impact is that this is mandatory. It's not optional. It's mandatory for public interest companies, for listed companies. Sorry?
Our research shows it hasn't happened.
No, sir. I think majority of the companies have independent directors on their board. And they are working quietly well.
Okay. Doesn't matter.
So, okay, fair enough. So, unfortunately, this is the problem that we have. Nobody wants to take ownership of anything in this country, and everybody is passing the buck onto the general condition. Let's get specific, Gonzalo. You have a big project in FPR. Let's get into the details. What is FPR doing about fixing the tax situation in this country? Kyo, sir? FPR and tax pe mein bata dein, what are the fresh initiatives you're looking for? How can the tax situation be alleviated next year? And the tariff situation, both are in your purview. Will we have some liberalization in the trade regime in the coming year? Will we have some simplification of taxes? Will we have some deregulation on documentation?
Sir, I think I'm not here to give any policy statement because that is not my domain. Don't ask me questions which I can't answer. But I think there are a lot of good things that are happening. Aftab Haider is sitting. That is one major part of initiative on part of Federal Board of Revenue to facilitate the trade in and out of Pakistan. And then there are a lot of initiatives taking place that we are moving towards digital invoicing. We are, trying to technologically monitor the production in different sectors. And this is the first time that we have also signed a contract for machine learning and artificial intelligence based monitoring of our tier 1 integrated retailers. So those are the things with which I am involved with, for which I can definitely say. And even Madam sitting at the top has been our member reform and modernization. She knows a lot what is the Federal Board of Revenue aiming at. But I'm sorry, I won't be able to, give you any specific answers to the questions that you have posed to.
PIDE has taken this initiative to document or to write reports and conduct research studies. Do involve the organization on which you are writing a paper, for the accuracy of the information, for providing you more data, correct data, because you see, if this goes to any reader, there may be a lot of things that are not correct, and that would not be fair either with the regulatory body or with yourself. So I would request, and I'll send a detailed letter on that as well, but engage, involve, and it would be good. I think it's a good thing that you invited. I remember there was an Econ Fest as well, festival as well in Lahore, and in the entire hall, when we were having a discussion on economy, we had hardly 25 people. So I said, this is the interest of this nation in economy. And while at least 100 were waiting for the musical concert outside, at least they have started this initiative, and we should appreciate that. And I'm thankful.
Thank you, madam. Dekhiye, our approach is very simple. I keep telling my people all the time that don't be held back by people who don't give you information. The government gives us zero information. Like just now, for example, we are doing something on debt capital. We're just asking the government agencies how many government houses there are in the country. They refuse to give them to us. So what should we do? Should we wait? No, we are not waiting. We are using GIS maps and we are putting them in their position, like bureaucratic perks, for example. We wrote a whole report on it. The bureaucracy is totally upset with us that you wrote this report. But hey, we will. And if you want to correct us, give us the information.
Yeah, but never, unless you ask. That is the question I'm saying. I mean, if you say that all the penalties imposed they are forming part of the fund of CCP, they aren't. The law doesn't say so. So these are such things that we need to just correct, and you come to us, and then if we don't give, you can try. But I'll just say you involve the regulatory body.
I will ask the author. My instructions are very simple. Go and ask. But if they don't give you the information, don't hold back. Make the best estimate possible and report it. We owe something to the people of Pakistan too. This business of living in silos and saying, hey, I'm not going to give you information, that has to end. We have to share information and we have to talk about this. I mean, this thing, for example, you go to any agency and you ask, what did we ask, Naya? What did we ask the Evacuate Property Trust? Please tell us. Give the mic to Naya, please. Please tell them.
We just wrote a simple letter asking them to provide us information for the land they own. And they wrote us back, I mean, exactly verbatim, I'm telling you, the competent authority has been pleased to reject your request.
They use the 19th century language. And they don't want to give you an iota of information. Tell me, Evacuate Property, does anybody in Pakistan know how much Evacuate Property holds?
And I mean, not exactly the same words, but we got similar letter from Okaf as well.
Okaf. Okay. No government department is willing to give us any information. So basically what they want to tell us, madam, is please don't say anything about us. Now, should we stop there? Should we stop then tell them, let me just finish. Should we stop and tell them that I don't see the houses opposite Kosar Market? Do I see houses opposite Kosar Market? Do they exist or not? Does the G5 real estate of the government exist or not? Does GOR1 in Lahore, GOR2 Lahore exist or not? Or should we just wait for the government to give us information?
No, I certainly don't intend to say that, but I'm talking only with reference to the organization that I had, and whatever was available in public domain, even that has not been even looked at. So I expect from PIDE a more responsible research. That's all I was making my point.
PIDE has a mandate to explore public policy in Pakistan, and we should evaluate agencies. For example, the amazing thing is 75 years and we haven't evaluated Evacuate Property. Evacuate Property holds, I think there was a parliamentary hearing recently. They have 100 billion rupee income from undervalued assets. That's how much property they hold. And you know, Gandhala, what Evacuate Property is? This is the property that was left at the time of partition by people who ran away. And 75 years later, we've still got that Evacuate Property. Okaf has, I can give you case law, how much property Okaf has, and they refuse to give us information on this. Now, how should we take it? In government, for example, when you ask the government, you ask them, how many cars do you own? British government owns 45 cars. Pakistan, each department has thousands of cars. We ask for information, they don't want to give it to us. So our problem is that we are knocking ahead, and my researchers come to me and say, we don't want to do it. So I point them in the direction of the World Bank. World Bank makes estimates and gives them to us. So why can't we make estimates? Why don't you challenge the World Bank on their estimates? They tell us all kinds of estimates that are strange, and we take them, like, for example, 10 million houses, which we challenge, right? So the research is a business of making estimates, and we should have a dialogue. We should talk about them. So that's a key, but I take your point fully. But anyway, anybody else wants to come in on deregulation? It's getting time to move on. Any thoughts from the audience? Anything from the floor? You guys who think there's no crisis in this country, you guys who think that economics is not important, anything?
I think we sometimes hit a roadblock in dealing with people. Like I made a comment earlier that a lot of people are actually not qualified to the job that they are placed at. And sometimes I think that, you know, when we talk about regulatory reform, are we not looking at just part of the problem and ignoring the bigger problem that is more about how the entire government is organized? For example, you have Ministry of Commerce, which is not run by people who are expert in trade and commerce. You have FPR, which has a conflicting role of revenue collection as well as trade facilitation. And, you know, there are a number of other examples where the boundary just becomes blurred. So I think that is also one of the questions that probably I would like to bring up, and how the entire government is organized and whether there are ways of organizing it in a better way. The other thing is that, you know, when we interact with most of these organizations, and at this point in time, I think I represent the private sector because I'm not in the government sector. at all. I resigned from my civil service position to get into this position. And I really understand the perspective of at least this private sector who's working in cross-border trade. And we look at all the government functionaries that they're working with, and we believe that a lot of time the regulations over there are to protect the turfs and to protect their jurisdictions, because they just don't want this transparency of somebody else looking into what they are doing. And for example, when we were coming up with the single window framework, we decided that although it was led by Pakistan Customs is still the lead agency. Single window does not come under FPR. It's a national initiative. I think Madam Amrina talked about the national initiative, and this is what single window is doing. We are not coming under any particular ministry except for having an interface with the government where the Ministry of Finance is there. Otherwise, we are very independent. The last point, democratization of data. I think one of the initiatives that we have done, and just this morning, Gonzalo and I were having an exchange of emails, is that we have liberalized trade data. Just last week, the federal cabinet has approved the rules that have been gazetted, published, trade data dissemination rules. If you want access to trade data, you can come to us, sign an NDA and get the data from us. That's an initiative that we took. And on this note, I think the point here is who is going to take the lead in reformation. It's very easy to blame politicians, it's easy to blame military, it's easy to blame bureaucrats. But we'll need to look at which pillar of the government or state is there, which provides a sort of stability in the entire governance framework. The single window initiative is an emerging public success story, was managed by bureaucrats who were committed. Unfortunately, that is an isolated example. So, I mean, this entire way that we have organized our government also needs to look into.
And all I'm talking about civil service reform, madam, is are you able to coordinate? Is the Secretary Committee able to coordinate? And if you tell me it cannot, then I'm deeply worried. So who is coordinating this effort that BOI is putting up? Mashallah, theek hai, ki ji, good, deregulate. Again, Gonzalo, I'm not saying that no regulation, but regulation, as we all know, has to be very carefully crafted. And if you go and look at Terol's famous book, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a very complex thing to do. And we haven't taken up this subject of the capacity of our regulators. When our regulators are formed, like Rahat tells me, she doesn't have a full body of commissioners and technical skills. Same thing for other PTA doesn't have enough people. SECP, G.
I just want to clarify. There was another thing mentioned that most of us civil servants is not one single civil servant with us. But we don't have a quorum for a year.
Yeah.
You know, since March 22, I've been working and we had 2 and now we have 1. So that's what I said, prioritize institutions.
What is the difficulty in recruiting?
That the government has to do that. Generally, the finance ministry does the selection and then they propose it to the cabinet and then they approve it. It's both ways. Open competitive process, generally. Yeah. Open competitive process, relevant ministry, that's how it's done.
Well, I've sat in the interviews for people, for these positions. And I must confess, I'm deeply dissatisfied with the process. Some civil servant makes up a list of 50 people and they put together a body of 4 or 5 people. And you're supposed to interview them for 2 minutes and appoint somebody. Are you happy with that? Is that how you want your commissioners?
Sorry, I'm saying, yes, this is the general concern here that even where the processes are competitive, eventually who are the people who make it? How fair it is, how merit-oriented it is, that it's not about one organization, it's the general hiring process that needs to be corrected. And I can't disagree with what Nadeem Saab is pointing out. That remains one of the concerns.
How many of your agencies have the talent required? For example, NEPRA, OGRA, anybody here? How many of the agencies have the requisite skills to be able to do, or FPR, for example, does FPR have a research department, sir? Gonzalo, does FPR have a research department? Does FPR have a research department?
Sir,
should the FPR have a research department?
Definitely, why not? I think as I know, Federal Board of Revenue has signed an MOU with PIDE to do research in such certain areas. Although I'm not looking at it, but there is a Director General who is looking at all the data and research part of the Federal Board of Revenue.
Our commission, we have around 150 employees, and the officers have a from different background, finance, economics, accounts, and they're very bright as well. It's not that we don't have good people, but we need to build the capacity much, much more. You are overseeing the entire economy, and if you have 150 people, you need to strengthen that. The commissioner's appointment is different. It comes from the government, but otherwise we can hire. However, when we talk about autonomy in public sector, it's just not the hiring aspect. It should also be the firing aspect that's relevant.
So, addressing your question, sir. This is one of the areas I felt where a reform was needed. FBR needed to have its own research center or department for evidence-based policy making. And while I was there, I had a dialogue with the Asian Development Bank, and I think it's in the process, sir. So we are going to have, FBR is going to have a center for revenue and development studies. It's part of the Asian Development Bank program. So we are heading in that direction, our own research institute.
Government of Pakistan do if everything is done by these guys?
No, they are our partners, and at times, of course, you have to work together. It's not possible, perhaps, at this point in time to, as we said, work in isolation. So there's no harm in having collaborative ventures.
The ADB and the World Bank, but not amongst ourselves.
Why not?
Because you're saying we're in silos, but we are in collaboration with them.
Asian Development Bank offer to help us in that. If you want to help, we'll be happy to work with you also. Why not?
Saying is, silos. Oops, in the government, we are operating in silos, right? In the government, the FPR is not talking to the Ministry of Commerce. Ministry of Commerce is not talking this, that, etc. Right? That's agreed. Isn't that what's happening? So, and yet we are talking to the donors, right? And they are doing the business. So, I mean, how does this work? Please explain.
Okay, so I would be the sir, I would be the wrong person to comment on this, because contrary to, the experience in most public sector agencies, I've had a very good experience with development partners. And the reason for it, and I remember that I was in a space with you a few months back, and we had this discussion as well. I'm saying that I've had a good experience because actually, the blame, if the donor is not delivering, does not lie on the consultants or the donor agency. It basically lies on the person who has enlisted that donor to do the work. Most of the times, we don't know what do we want the consultants to do. I'm talking about whosoever is giving out the work, whether it's a civil servant or it's a people.
Or are you working in silo?
Well, I am not working in silo.
Not you.
Of course. So my experience has been different, but yes, on drawing on the experience of my previous life as a civil servant, I think there's a lot of isolation within the government sector, and the policy making is made in silos. You circulate a draft amongst all the agencies, you get the comments, and you publish a policy. Doesn't really mean that people have sat down together and actually discussed the nitty-gritty of the policy. So that definitely is a problem. When I was working in FBR, I always thought that whatever policy making was being done, especially in tariffs, nobody was actually calculating the impact of that post-budget. For example, we take a proposal to the federal government, we tell them that we want a tariff reduction because it's going to spur investment, but it really spur investment. So there is actually no analysis in that sense. But then that ties up to the larger question of the capacity of the public sector. Most of the people who are working in the public sector would hardly get by 9 to 5 in doing the job. For some reason, the government sector is usually always in firefighting mode. There's just so much going on that you really can't sit down and plan things. I mean, just on a very personal note, since the last 2 years, I'm leading the single window company. There is a cohort of civil servants working with me on deputation, but you won't believe it that not a single person, whether from civil service or from the private sector, could come up with a work plan or even a business plan of what we wanted to do. So we are just not trained to work that way.
Despite the fact that we have 200 plus, Fahim Saab, how many training agencies do we have? Where's Fahim? Gone. Huh? 220 training academies, we still don't have the capacity. So training academies are another agency. Gee, sir, what would you like to say on this?
I'm not too sure if I can comment on how well the government departments work with each other. I do. I mean, there are instances when we do see two different departments not agreeing with each other. And then something happens and something comes out, and then we find out at the 11th hour that something has happened. And then we go into kind of response mode because there wasn't enough consultation in the due process. So so that does happen. So that does happen. What I do want to say is when it comes to the private sector, you know, we have heard references to certain initiatives which the government takes to enable the private sector. Perhaps another advantage would be to request and see the government as drawing itself out of the private sector's domain. Let the private sector work. Let us do, whether it comes to development, whether it comes to new projects, whether it comes to new businesses, we are able to create opportunities. The government should do what it has to do. It has to provide basic services. It has to cater to the citizens. It has to provide good education systems. I mean, our education system is faltering. Let the lines be defined and the private sector recede. The government recede from the markets kind of business, if you will. Thank you.
But mujhe bataiye, are you willing to accept competition? Are you willing to accept that some of you will face market risk? Are you willing to accept that some of you might die?
Absolutely. I think what's lacking in our market is new entrants are finding it hard to survive. If you have a big player, the big player is able to survive through difficult times because, well, they have the capital to. They'll put in more money, they'll find a way out. But a young fledgling business or even a mid-sized business will not be able to bear the regulatory cost because as a percentage, the regulatory cost is much bigger on their balance sheet. So it's hard for businesses to survive, hence they shut down, hence people migrate out. So yes, competition will increase when the market works and when more people and more businesses are able to succeed in the market.
But yet when you guys lobby, you lobby to make sure that all of you survive.
As for the Pakistan Business Council is concerned, we're a research-based organization, so we would never lobby for anyone or not any interest group. Yes, if there are groups and industries and who lobby for themselves and who try to find grounds for their own interests, well, be it, that's their doing. And it's for the government to decide who to pander and who not to pander. But as far as PBC is concerned, we're very clear. We only advocate policies to the government which are in the best interest of the country and the economy.
There is a question from Mr. Moin.
Yes. So here's we're talking about regulatory reform, but the existing regulatory framework is, you know, as we just it was mentioned that it's not fully being utilized. I mean, the regulators don't have the members are not there. The regulatory sort of the full force of the regulators are not functioning. So, and we're just watching this. It's been many years since this is happening. Weak regulators, inadequate, not fully, where the positions are not fully filled out, and nobody seems to want to do anything about it. I mean, and I think here's where the consumers come in. If the consumers were more active and because they're the ones who are hurt by this, when the different sectors are not properly regulated.
The problem is the consumers are here. They don't care.
Yeah.
I just took a vote. I asked them questions. Nobody cares. So what do we do in this society? Since nobody cares, Let the state run the country. The state runs the country and we're all very happy because we don't care. But the second thing is regulators are not weak. Regulators are very strong where it comes to their own interests. They are not interested in the market. They don't develop the market. All they want to do is play with the market and be just bosses of the market. So they're very strong where they want to be, which is basically fixing the market and destroying the market. Take the SCCP, for example. You have it before you. I just told you what the SCCP does. We have no defense. They don't want to defend themselves. So what can we do? They're very comfortable where they are, that the PE ratio has gone down to, what is the PE ratio now, sir? What is the price earnings ratio on the market, the average? So the average price earning ratio is about 4 now. But do you think the SCCP cares? No, it doesn't. Do you think it's not regulating? It is, because it's killing the market. So what do? People don't want to take an interest. जी कोई और बोलना चाहता है? बोलिए.
जी कर दूं कि SCCP regulation making process क्या है? So SCCP has its own provision in the law. Whenever the regulations are to be made, it shall be.
आपका process पता है.
जी.
Point ये market क्यों नहीं बढ़ती?
जी.
मैं पैसे क्यों हारता हूँ? ये सारे पैसे क्यों हारते हैं मार्केट में? ये point है.
जी. वो चूंकि मार्केट कंट्रीब्यूट नहीं कर रही कमेंट्स में, मार्केट कंट्रीब्यूट नहीं करती, जैसे आज नहीं कर रहे, तो अगर प्रॉपर रेगुलेशन मेकिंग, स्मार्ट रेगुलेशन बनाते हैं तो उसमें मार्केट की कंट्रीब्यूशन हमें चाहिए. पीबीसी करता है, OICCI करता है, लेकिन बाकी मार्केट से कोई कंट्रीब्यूशन नहीं
है. एक मिनट.
So this is.
What's your comment? You've done some research on this, right?
Okay, I'm trying to grasp the main point that, sir, you were trying to. आपका क्या point था, sir? Can you say it again?
नहीं, मेरा
अच्छा.
The market is not working. The P is down to 4. Why is the stock market not working?
Why is the stock market not working? Well, I think I'm going to excuse myself from that answer because I don't think I would have any comment to make on it.
BTC has not done any work on this?
At the moment, we won't have a comment to make.
You have not done any work on this?
Why is the stock market not functioning at the moment? I'm afraid I won't have a comment on
At
that.
the moment, let's say 20 years down before. This is the only stock market. Sorry, this is the only stock market for 3 months. Closed for 3 months. Why?
I think I'll just be guessing at best. And my best guess would be that we have seen the market narrow. And we've seen it narrow because we haven't seen enough vibrancy in the market for the same reason that I explained earlier, that there's not enough new entrants, there's not enough IPOs happening, there's not enough new businesses which are kind of growing. So I mean, one would expect that the market would not grow if not shrink. So I mean, that was the best explanation I can give at the moment, but there's no kind of stated stance that we have on this topic. Thank you.
And I think one more solution, I think it's a point that small business are growing. So I think they are considering themselves as profitable much more than becoming listed on the stock market.
Are they growing or are they not?
They are growing.
Oh, they are.
Small business. Yeah.
Okay. So we'd love to have some statistics on if you've seen those small businesses.
Yeah, we can provide. We can share.
Yeah, I mean, I was just asking for the benefit of the audience. Thank you.
BOI का कोई जवाब है इस पे कि इन्वेस्टमेंट स्टॉक मार्केट में क्यों नहीं आ रही?
जिससे पहले ही बात हमने की कि सिर्फ इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज या रेगुलेशंस की वजह से इन्वेस्टमेंट्स नहीं आती, परसेप्शन की वजह से भी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स आती हैं. हम पिछले 20-21 सालों से फ्रंट लाइन स्टेट के तौर पे काम कर रहे हैं, सिक्योरिटी स्टेट के तौर पे काम कर रहे हैं. हमें अपनी परसेप्शन को चेंज करने की बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत है. इस पे हमें बहुत काम करना पड़ेगा. हम तो पाकिस्तान को बेच लेते हैं, हमारे पास तो यूनिक सेलिंग पॉइंट्स बहुत सारे हैं पाकिस्तान के वाले से. इतनी बड़ी पॉपुलेशन है, यंग पॉपुलेशन है, स्किल्ड पॉपुलेशन है, लेकिन लोग आने को तैयार नहीं है. ट्रैवल एडवाइजरीज हैं और बहुत सारे मसले हैं. इसको होल पिक्चर में हमें देखने की जरूरत है. सिर्फ इस तरह बात कर देना कि इन्वेस्टमेंट क्यों नहीं BOI लेके आ रहा, हमने तो हमारी तो सारी गारंटीज ही एस्टैब्लिशमेंट की तरफ से जाती है, इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज की और चीजों की. IMF भी गारंटीज कहीं और जाके मांगता है, हमारे तो लोग जाके कहीं और जाके बात करते हैं. लेट मी वेरी कैंडिड अबाउट दिस. मेरा ख्याल है कि इस पे भी हमें बात करनी चाहिए. थैंक यू.
जी, अब मेरा क्वेश्चन जिस तरह ना ये इकोनॉमिक्स में Dr. Anwar Shah from School of Economics, Qaid-e-Azam University. मेरा क्वेश्चन जो है ना, जिस तरह ना वी हैव प्राइस डिस्क्रिमिनेशन इन इकोनॉमिक्स, तो इज देयर रेगुलेटरी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन और द स्लच कास्ट which is different from a section of the society to, for example, I'm giving an example. For example, we have politician. Is the sludge cost for the parliamentarian is the same as for a common people like me? So are the regulation in this cost, is it the same? Or is there any, for example, information or even volume 1 and volume 2, which the PIDE has issued, whether they, estimate such kind of cost? For example, to my little bit knowledge, because I have conducted one thesis, the parliamentarian, they have a huge wealth and they are doing many businesses. So if they want to, for example, establish a new business, so will this regulatory cost will be the same as for a person who is starting?
लेकिन जी अनवर साहब आपकी बात बिल्कुल सही है, but एक चीज जो हमने देखी है, which is very important to think, that this country, for example, think about it, how many billion-dollar businesses do we have in this country? As I said, Engro is one, but there are very few billion-dollar businesses in this country. And if you go to India or if you go anywhere else, there are tons of them, right? So the question is something stopping companies from growing? For example, we did a thing on Sialkot. Sialkot, the very small companies. Gujarat, very small companies, right? Why? They don't grow. SMEs that they're talking about, SMEs, for example, does your SMEs, pankhe wale SMEs, energy? So look at that. They've been making fans for how long? For the last 100 years? And they're still SMEs. Now that's the puzzle. That's the puzzle I have in my mind. SMEs, Gujarat, those pankha walas, GFC, and those guys have been making pankhas for 100 years. They're still an SME. Sialkot has been making sports industries for 100 years. They're still an SME.
Sir, your solution, sir. आपका क्या solution है इसमें? कैसे वो grow करेंगे? बताएं.
I'm giving you my solution. For God's sakes, we gave you the solution. We don't need another regulatory agency to monitor the regulators. We are building regulator upon regulator. We don't need a single window. We have to make the whole country a single window. I lived for, Gonzalo, how long did you live in DC for? So how long have you lived in, you're an American probably, you lived in America, right? All your life, right? Well, major part of your life. Tell me, how many government offices have you seen in the insides of a government office? How many government offices have you been to? But that's not a government office. You go to the shopping mall and get it, right? I mean, that's not in a shopping mall, right? So I've never seen a government office. Here, I can't survive without going to a government office every day. So for God's sakes, just stop people from going to government offices. Sorry, what? What does that mean?
Tax globally.
How many can we attack globally? Pakistan is. Well, anyway, that's a different subject. Let's look at this for a start. That people do not have to go to government offices. Can we make that happen? Can we just make this happen, single window? Can you just make sure that I don't see a government official? I had to get a family registration certificate and I had to go see Chairman Nadra.
Sir, end product जो हमारी है पाकिस्तान बिजनेस पोर्टल, वो यही कॉन्सेप्ट है कि कोई आपकी इंटरेक्शन फिजिकल ना हो, आप हर चीज वहीं से मिल जाए आपको, इंफॉर्मेशन भी, एनओसीज भी, ई पेमेंट्स भी, ये वही सारा कॉन्सेप्ट जिसकी तरफ जा रहा है.
Let me put it this way, slightly different. Supposing I was playing a game of cricket, or anybody's playing a game of cricket, and in order to bat, I have to go get an NOC. In order to bowl, I have to get an NOC. What kind of a game would that be?
सर, ZTTS पॉलिसी के बारे में आपको बताया है कि जिसमें लो रिस्क है उसको तो हम डन अवे विद कर रहे हैं एनओसीज.
Risk कौन decide करेगा? You will decide.
Yes, we are giving the policy.
Who's going to decide?
Federal cabinet is going to
Why?
give.
Federal cabinet में risk लेके जाए ना, मुझे पता है risk क्या. What is the risk in any policy? Please मुझे पता चले. क्यों छी? Sir बताइए. You seem to have an answer.
नहीं सर, मेरा पर्सपेक्टिव क्रॉस बॉर्डर ट्रेड में थोड़ा सा डिफरेंट इस तरह बनता है कि अभी हम तकरीबन, लेट मी चेक, जो मैं अपने साथ नोट्स लाया था, जून 2023 तक हम तकरीबन 20 के करीब डिपार्टमेंट्स को सिंगल विंडो के अंदर इंटीग्रेट कर चुके होंगे. मेरे पास अब तक जो डेटा है, तकरीबन 100 के करीब प्रोसेसेस हमने री इंजीनियर किए हैं, 45 से करीब डॉक्यूमेंट्स हमने एलिमिनेट किए हैं. इसके अलावा भी डेटा है जिसमें कौन से डॉक्यूमेंट्स को हम ऑनलाइन सब्स्टिट्यूट कर चुके हैं. कुछ एनओसीज ऐसी होती हैं जिनका ताल्लुक लोकल नहीं होता, उनकी इंटरनेशनल रिक्वायरमेंट है। मिसाल के तौर पे अगर आप एग्रीकल्चर कमोडिटी की इंपोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं तो दैट इज एन इंटरनेशनल रिक्वायरमेंट, यू नीड एन इंपोर्ट परमिट or an export permit because your trading partners want to know that the produce has gone through certain treatments before they would allow it inside the country.
That doesn't require an NOC.
It is called an import permit. It acts
based on certain requirements.
exactly.
Concrete requirements.
Exactly.
What I'm suggesting very simple. I shouldn't have to go and wait outside an official's office for 2 hours.
100%.
And ruin my day. After all, my time has value too. If I
100%.
stand outside an official's office for 2 hours and then be demeaned and say, come tomorrow, come day after tomorrow, should that happen to anybody?
Not at all. Single window champion, because this is the entire concept of single window, that there should be no physical visits to offices. There should be no waiting times. Everything should be
So
digitized.
what's the NOC doing?
So now the NOC is a policy mandate, and as part of our work with the government agencies, we are eliminating most of the NOCs on cross-border trade.
Gonzalo is saying all NOCs is discretion. All NOCs gives me the power to say, I don't like your face. Come back tomorrow, come back day after tomorrow. Is that what you want?
Exactly, no. So we are just keeping the NOCs or the permits that are an international requirement, but the rest of them, the government agencies, we are talking to them to eliminate them. And
Sir, I also have a question, sir. So you've been also part of the government, sir. So why not you have implemented such solutions at that point in time, sir?
Question?
Sir, I'm saying that you have giving excellent innovative solutions. So you have been also part of the government during your tenure as DCPC. So why don't you implemented those solutions at that point in time, sir?
Because I'm not Akbar Badshah, nor am I a king. I can only talk. I can't do anything. Ultimately, the civil service runs the country. You can only recommend to them, and they don't want to listen, and they don't sit together, and they won't turn up at these events. So what do? So the question is really, we have to stand up, and here these people should stand up and say, we don't want NOC. Simple. You want to go to a government official's office and stand
Sir,
outside,
consider that if I'm talking about deregulation and we have, for example, income tax ordinance, and आज मैं उसको abolish कर देता हूँ, तो मेरे पास क्या frame of वो चलेगा? It will be an utter chaos. So we don't have to abolish laws or regulations. मैं DRAP Act 1977 आज abolish कर देता हूँ deregulation के उस पे. तो scheme of law में कैसे चीजें चलेंगी, sir?
You can't prove your point by giving absurd arguments. Nobody's saying, I can kill everybody in this room and that will be perfect deregulation. Yeah, let's be fair. Let's have a rational discussion. ये जो आपने बात की बिल्कुल मैं क्या कहूँ, it's stupid. ये तो कोई बात नहीं. देखिए, nobody's saying abolish the income tax of.
Sir, you are talking about deregulation of the in the country, aren't you?
यार इसको समझाएं, आप शायद समझाएं. ये कहाँ ये BOI में, आप BOI में?
मैं BOI में.
नहीं सर, मैं तो डिस्कशन में किसी और तरफ जाना चाह रहा था.
ये जो absurd argument दे रहे हैं, is this how you people think?
I think आपके बारे में personal तो नहीं है, but I think there's a feeling that a lot of government officers, when they are not in government, they come up with really innovative solutions. और ये question younger lot पूछती है कि जब आप government में थे तो आपने काम क्यों नहीं किए? तो आपसे नहीं पूछा जा रहा, मतलब जनरली लोगों से पूछा जा रहा है. सर
मुझे प्रॉब्लम यही जो बात करेंगे सारा कुछ कर.
नहीं जो जो प्रॉब्लम है रेगुलेशन में और स्टैट्यूट्स में तो फर्क है ना. देखिए, इनकम टैक्स तो यू नीड अ टैक्स पॉलिसी, आपने लोकल लेवल पे करना है. एनओसी की बात जो नदीम साहब फरमा रहे हैं वो बेसिकली ये है कि जब इनकम टैक्स ऑर्डिनेंस को आप नाफिज करने जाते हैं तो उसमें आपने कितने स्टेप्स रखे हुए हैं कि आपको रिटर्न फाइल करने के लिए भी 10 जगह एनओसी लेनी पड़े, वो रिडंडेंट चीजें हैं. सो बट मेरा ख्याल सर ये है कि देखिए, मैं बात फिर यही करूंगा कि यू नीड टू हैव क्रिएटिव स्ट्रक्चर्स इन द वे यू गवर्न. हम लोगों ने जब सिंगल विंडो का इनिशिएटिव किया तो हम लोगों ने प्राइवेट सेक्टर को अपने साथ रखा हुआ है. हमारे बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स में पाकिस्तान बिजनेस काउंसिल के नॉमिनी बैठे हैं, हमारे बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स में FPCCI के नॉमिनी बैठे हैं. सिंगल विंडो यूनिवर्सिटी से हमने मांगा हुआ है. देयर इज स्टेक होल्डर एडवाइजरी कमेटी. मैं आपको बताता हूँ जो मेरी अर्ज सुनने सर, इसके अंदर जो गवर्नेंस का स्ट्रक्चर है वो इस तरह का है कि बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स तो SECP के रेगुलेशंस के तहत बना, लेकिन उसके बाद एक गवर्निंग काउंसिल बनी है टॉप लेवल पे जो कि सिंगल विंडो सिस्टम को मॉनिटर करती है कि क्या हम जो काम कर रहे हैं वो एक्चुअली ट्रेड को हेल्प कर रहे हैं. नहीं, वहां पे प्राइवेट सेक्टर भी बैठा है, वहां पे एकेडमिक लिंकेजेस भी हैं. सर आप एकेडमिया को बुलाने वाले हैं उसमें, दिस आई नो। नहीं, दैट इज पार्ट ऑफ द प्लान, याद नहीं है, नोटिफाई एफबीआर ने करना है सर, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फाइनेंस ने करना है, द प्रपोजल इज ऑलरेडी देयर।
सर, I have a question, sir. I have a question. So this is Asim Ayaz. I'm General Manager Policy of Engineering Development Board. We have an MOU with you. We are working with this national single window also, and in harmony as well. Sir, I'll draw your attention towards some policy which my office made. That was mobile device manufacturing policy. Within 2 years, we brought in 30 companies. I'm not saying that we have excellent regulatory system. PTA is doing well. IOC is doing well. Engineering Development Board and the policy measures. I must say we have done well that we have 30 companies, except Apple. Everybody is here. Almost every good brand is here. There is nothing wrong with, I think, the regulatory framework, but the industry has gone down. They are saying, Mr. Asim, you told us we will have the constant policies and now we are shutting down. Where should we go? I mean, I think you are aware of the 19th May circular, or the circular which was done by SPP now. Virtually, there is no employment there right now. We created 40,000 jobs. Now we are with 2,000. How will you advise us in this scenario, that if every department like PTA, Ministry of Industry, everybody is doing well, and the industry is going down the drain in 4 months?
Should Pakistan be protecting mobile phones, Gonzalo? Pakistan is, EDB is very proud of the fact that Pakistan has a mobile manufacturing protective policy where we've started 30 companies manufacturing mobiles. What do you think of that policy? Mike de Deneji.
Gonzalo.
Gonzalo, I'll just take the opportunity to invite you on the stage. If you can have a quick response to what was discussed, and also to respond to the query of Vice Chancellor, because we don't want to stand anymore between us and Aftari. Thank
I
you.
was supposed to say something else here on the stage, but I'll answer the question on the mobile policy. So the mobile policy looks very much like the auto policy. And the auto policy hasn't been very good for the development of an auto industry that is globally competitive. What the mobile policy did in a nutshell, or the most important element, was to increase import duties on the completely built units, reduce import duties on the knockdown parts. And so you have assemblers that come here and in the sheltered by import duties, sheltered from competition from abroad. What they do is they buy parts and assemble, buy the parts with low import duties and assemble and sell at expensive prices because they are protected from the tariff. That has led to virtually zero exports, but also it has led to a reduction in import duties, because before you were collecting more import duties from the completely built units, and now you collect the import duties from the parts that are lower. So that import substitution, what it does is it substitutes exports and it creates more imports, but lower tariff revenue. So let's see what happens in the coming years. But in principle, I wouldn't see any difference from what has happened with the auto sector, because the instrument is very similar.
Thank you, Gonzalo, for being very brief, because we are, I guess, losing patience. So I guess one point agenda that we had today, which all of us agree, the beginning to solving a solution is acknowledging a problem. I guess we all have acknowledged that we have problems and we have to address them. Finally, to close this session, I would invite Ms. Ambeen Iftikhar. She is the Additional Secretary, Board of Investment, to please come on stage and close the session with her closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ji. I think I've said all that needed to be said in this particular session. But I think this is the beginning of a very healthy kind of dialogue, and it's okay to have disagreements and different points of view. That's perfectly all right. That's how we all learn and we evolve. And I do hope that we can all go home with some takeaways from this session, because that, I think, is the most important objective of having a symposium like this one. Once again, I would like to thank the PIDE team, my own team also at the Board of Investment. And we all, as I said before, we all have to think collectively also and individually also. और एक चीज मैं ये कहूंगी, the audience, please do participate, and we all have a voice. और आपकी आवाज बहुत important है, जैसे डॉक्टर साहब ने कहा. So participate करें, questions पूछें, confront करें. We want to be accountable. We need to be accountable, whether it's the government or other sectors. And we have to change this culture of, not interacting or engaging with each other. हमारा मुल्क है, हम सबका मुल्क है, and we have to work together to take it forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. And let's have Aftar, but let's wait for the prayer call. Thank you.